I joked about canceling my wedding, and my brother confessed his love to my fiancée. He left his pregnant wife and convinced our family to cut all contact with us. It feels like I accidentally destroyed my family. Let me explain. At 26, I got engaged to my beautiful fiancée, Olivia. She was 25. Olivia and I grew up in the same neighborhood. We went to the same kindergarten and were practically inseparable until high school. We started dating when I was 18 and she was 17. After that, we spent 4 years in a long-distance relationship while we were both in college. As soon as I graduated, I moved to her city to be closer to her and started my own business. After years of distance, I was exhausted from being apart, and the timing finally felt perfect. We lived together for a year while she finished nursing school, and I worked non-stop trying to grow my business. It was hard, but eventually things started going well. Olivia graduated last year and began working as a pediatric nurse. By that point, we had already been living together for over a year. That was when I finally did what I had dreamed of my entire life. I proposed to her. She said yes. We stayed engaged for almost 2 years because we wanted to save enough money to buy our own home before spending anything on a wedding. We didn't want a big celebration anyway. Everything felt perfect. This was exactly how I imagined my future when I was a kid. We both earned good money and planned to get married the following year. We even talked about having a child someday. Everything was going great. I never thought that a single joke could ruin my life, but that's exactly what happened last week during a family dinner. My parents invited Olivia and me over to celebrate their wedding anniversary. My younger sister Kate was there, as well as my older brother Jake and his wife Rachel. Jake and Rachel had been married for about a year and a half and were expecting their first child. We were sitting at the table, enjoying dinner and wine, when my dad jokingly asked whether Olivia and I were ever actually going to get married or if we planned to stay permanently engaged. Before anyone assumes he was being rude, my dad is a classic dad joker. He has known Olivia since childhood and already considers her his daughter-in-law. He knew perfectly well that not getting married was never an option. He was just teasing us. I laughed, shrugged, and said something like, "Well, you know, weddings are a lot of work. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. Maybe we should just cancel everything and save ourselves the headache." It was meant as a harmless joke. I love Olivia more than anything and can't wait to marry her. I was slightly drunk and didn't think for a second that my words could hurt her. But they did. She started crying. I was horrified. I immediately apologized, told her it was just a joke, that I didn't mean it, and that I couldn't wait to marry her. Every word of that was true, but she was deeply upset and ran to the bathroom. I followed her, but she wouldn't open the door. Eventually, I had to return to the table alone. Everyone was shocked. No one finished their dinner. My mom and sister talked to Olivia and told me she wanted to be alone and would stay with them for the night. They said it would be best if I left and gave her some space. I apologized again and went home feeling absolutely terrible. That night, I sent Olivia a long message apologizing for my stupid joke and promising I would never say anything like that again. I was confident in our relationship and believed that even if it took time, we would get through this. I went to bed hoping to talk to her in the morning. I had no idea what was coming. I went to sleep very late and woke up late the next day. I wanted to check my phone to see if Olivia had written to me, but it was dead. I had forgotten to charge it. I panicked, wondering if I had missed calls or messages. When I turned it on, he told her that he hoped she would think about what he said and give him an answer. He said he wanted to marry her and would never make her wait years for a ring the way I supposedly had. He promised he would leave his wife and give Olivia everything she wanted. He even suggested that they run away together and start a new life far away from all of us. As expected, Olivia was completely horrified. She told him exactly what she thought of him, called him a monster for wanting to abandon his pregnant wife, and said that he disgusted her. Then she turned around and walked back toward the house. Her only plan was to quickly say goodbye to my family and come back to me. She had no intention of telling anyone what my brother had said, but it was already too late. When she walked inside, she saw Rachel, Jake's wife. Rachel was crying in my mother's arms. The moment she saw Olivia, she completely lost control. She screamed and lunged at her, and my sister had to physically hold her back. The scene was chaotic and emotional. That was when everything became clear. When Rachel woke up that morning, Jake was gone. After searching the apartment, she found a note on the nightstand. In it, he wrote that he was sorry, but he couldn't keep living like this. He said he had to leave because this might be his only chance to be with Olivia before it was too late. He had packed clothes and taken some of his belongings. Rachel tried desperately to call and text him, only to realize that he had blocked her. In panic, she decided to go to my parents' house. When she arrived and saw Olivia there, she exploded. There was a lot of screaming and insults. Rachel called Olivia a home wrecker and said many other cruel things. My mother was deeply embarrassed and redirected her anger toward me and Olivia. My father tried to calm everyone down, but my mother told him to stay out of it. Everyone tried to reach me, but because of my dead phone, I was unreachable. Eventually, Rachel left, saying she would never forgive us and that because of us, she would now be a single mother. By the time I arrived, Jake was still nowhere to be found. No one could reach him. That's how everything happened. I was in complete shock. I could barely process any of it. I just stood there, staring at Olivia. Even now, it still doesn't feel real. Olivia tried to explain that this was the first time she had ever heard anything like this from Jake, and that she had no idea he felt this way. I know she's telling the truth. I can't believe he carried this obsession for so many years. I was furious with my brother, but even angrier with my mother and sister for trying to blame Olivia. I could understand Rachel lashing out in pain, but I couldn't understand how everyone could gang up on the one person who had done absolutely nothing wrong, especially when she was already devastated. I apologized to Olivia for everything she had to hear and for arriving so late. Then I asked her to wait for me in the car while I talked to my mother and sister. That conversation went terribly. My mother was completely irrational and insisted that all of this could have been avoided if I had chosen my words better and hadn't joked about canceling the wedding. That made no sense to me. Anyone with basic reasoning could tell it was a joke. And even if it was poorly timed, how could she not blame my brother, the person who actually destroyed his marriage? I told my mother she owed Olivia an apology. That only made her angrier. She said she would never say a single kind word to Olivia for seducing her son and breaking the family apart. I was stunned. Then my sister said that my brother wouldn't have done something like this without a reason, and that Olivia must have given him hints that she was unhappy with me. Otherwise, why would he leave his wife? My mother claimed that Olivia and I had ruined the family and robbed her of the chance to be a grandmother because Rachel had said she would never allow anyone from our family near her or the baby. I tried to explain how illogical all of this was, but they told me to leave and never come back. So I did. Olivia and I went home together. We were both emotionally exhausted and didn't know what to do. I kept replaying everything my mother and sister had said, slowly starting to doubt my own sense of reality. I tried reaching out to them later, but my father told me that no one wanted to speak to either me or Olivia anymore. Update 1. I want to say how grateful I am for the support I received, and for those who believe I didn't do anything malicious that night at dinner. Some people asked why Olivia reacted so strongly to my joke. I didn't want to share something so personal, but I asked her if she was okay with it, and she agreed. She has forgiven me. I told her I knew I had acted like an idiot and promised I would never joke like that again. Our relationship is still strong, and I know we'll get through this together. The truth is, although we had agreed to stay engaged for a while and focus on practical goals like buying a home first, Olivia had started to feel insecure. A few months ago, she overheard coworkers gossiping about her never-ending engagement, and it hurt her more than she let on. She didn't tell me because she knew I would immediately suggest getting married right away, and financially, she knew waiting made sense. She trusted our relationship completely, but the doubts were still there beneath the surface. My father's joke about our engagement had already unsettled her, even though she tried to hide it. When I added my own joke, it was simply the breaking point. She felt humiliated and hurt, and it brought all those buried feelings back. I had no idea she had been carrying that. Honestly, I feel like a terrible partner for not noticing. We talked everything through and decided to have a small ceremony within the next 6 months so she wouldn't feel anxious anymore. For the past 2 years, we dreamed of a beautiful beach wedding after buying a home, but right now, what matters most is being married. After everything happening with my family, wedding planning feels overwhelming, but as long as she's by my side, I'll manage. As for why she stayed at my parents' house that night, my family has known Olivia nearly her entire life. She spent countless hours in that home, and my childhood bedroom almost feels like hers. She truly loved my family. If someone had told me earlier that my own mother and sister would turn against her and treat her so cruelly, I never would have believed it. This whole situation has shaken everything I believed in. My family is not speaking to me. I'm still trying to process what my brother did. He has not contacted Olivia since, and he avoids my calls as well. I don't know where he is. No one in my family wants to talk about him. And that's where things stand.
My father tried to stay neutral, but he didn't want to upset my mother. According to him, she was in hysterics at the thought that she might not see her first grandchild. He also said they had tried to contact my fiancé, but she made it clear that she didn't want to speak to any of them. I would never have guessed that my brother had feelings for Olivia. He is 4 years older than me. The three of us grew up together and played together since childhood. As I mentioned before, Olivia and I have been close almost our entire lives, even though we only started dating in my senior year of high school. My brother always had plenty of girls interested in him, serious relationships and casual flings alike. If he had wanted to, he could have asked Olivia out long before I did, but he didn't. I don't think I mentioned that Olivia and I had broken up for almost a year during a long-distance period. He knew about it and still never tried to pursue her, not even a little. So I cannot understand how he could suddenly pull something like this. I feel deeply ashamed of how he treated Rachel. Olivia and I both tried to reach out to her and explain our side, but she refused to talk. After several days of trying, we decided to respect her choice and stop bothering her. Honestly, I don't know what to do next. I still believe my fiancé deserves an apology from my family for everything she was forced to hear, and I will make sure she gets it. But for now, we both agreed it would be better to let everyone cool off before confronting them again. A few weeks later, my brother returned to his wife. When he showed up at home, he begged Rachel to give him a second chance. He claimed he hadn't been thinking clearly and blamed Olivia for everything. He even had the audacity to say that she had been giving him signals for years, and that night it all just hit him, so he made a rash decision. I cannot understand how anyone could believe such nonsense, but Rachel apparently did. She decided to forgive him. But what shocked me even more was my sister's reaction. Rachel no longer wanted to be part of our family and demanded that my brother move to another state and raise their child far from all of us. My brother tried to convince her to reconsider, and she agreed, but only on one condition. She never wanted to see me or my fiancé again. Our parents and my sister could be part of the child's life only if they completely cut me and Olivia out of the family forever. According to her, this was fair. She didn't want to be around anyone who had caused her so much pain. My brother passed this message to the family, and what truly hurt me was their response. They chose him and the unborn child over me. My mother and sister wouldn't even speak to me. My father came to my house to tell me the news. I tried to defend Olivia and myself, but he told me to leave things as they were and not make the situation worse. My disappointment is impossible to describe in words. This all happened just a couple of days after the previous events. A few more weeks have passed since then. Olivia and I are going through a very difficult period. No matter how much I try to convince her that she did nothing wrong, she still feels guilty, thinking that my family cut me off because of her. Honestly, I don't care about them anymore. What angers me most is their cowardice and how proudly they took the worst possible stance. I try to let it go, but I can't. I've even caught myself thinking about ways to make them pay, despite Olivia asking me to forget it. Maybe I'll come up with something. At the very least, my brother deserves a lesson.
Here's an interesting continuation. As I mentioned before, Olivia and I were furious at how my family had handled everything. It was clear that my brother only returned to his wife because he realized Olivia would never even consider being with him, and he had nowhere else to go. We, of course, do not blame my sister-in-law. The thought of her being a single mother is frightening enough. But we also understood that the whole situation was completely unfair to her. Amid all this family chaos, Olivia and I came up with a bold plan to expose my brother and reveal his true nature. The plan was risky, but we decided it was worth it. I had no doubt that my brother was a rotten person who would abandon a pregnant wife for his own brother's fiancée without hesitation. In theory, he could have realized his mistake and changed, but if he had truly regretted it, he would have proven it. The plan was this. Olivia would pretend to be interested in him, lure him into a trap, and show everyone who he really was. The risk was that my brother might see through the plan and lie to his wife and everyone else, claiming Olivia had provoked him. But since no one had been on our side anyway, we had nothing to lose. We were nervous, but Olivia was determined. She was supposed to visit him at work during lunch, tell him she had made a mistake, take him to a restaurant, and talk about the future. My role was to convince his wife to come to the same place and catch him in the act. I knew my brother would follow Olivia, but persuading his wife to even hear me out was more difficult. Still, it was worth trying. We took it seriously. Olivia even removed her engagement ring to make it convincing. As expected, my brother fell for it instantly. Olivia arrived, shed a few tears, and confessed her feelings. He melted immediately. She told him she had been afraid to admit her feelings, but was now ready to leave everything behind. Showing her bare finger without the ring erased his last doubts. Surprisingly, convincing his wife was easier than I thought. I think deep down she always knew the truth. We waited at the restaurant, and of course, Olivia entered with my brother. What happened next was spectacular. His wife confronted him publicly, yelled at him, and even splashed a drink in his face. My brother looked as if he were experiencing the worst moment of his life, and probably he was. He exploded in anger and started yelling at Olivia. That's when I stepped in. I had seen enough of how he humiliated her. A firm punch to the jaw solved the problem. We left together, his wife, Olivia, and I, and drove straight to my mother's house. We told her everything. After a few seconds of disbelief, my mother broke down in tears and apologized to both of us for everything she had said before. My sister did the same. I'm happy to report that my family is whole again. Now my brother must face the consequences of his actions. We made it clear to him and his wife that he no longer has a place in our family, but she and their future child are always welcome. His wife is an amazing woman, and she deserves to be loved and appreciated. I'm confident she will find someone who truly values her. Olivia and I promised that we will always support her and my future niece or nephew, making sure she never feels alone. She is still shaken, honestly. We are all shaken, but I believe things will get better with time. And that's it. There have been no further updates. The story seems to have reached a logical conclusion.
I tricked my cheating wife into believing that I was the one having an affair.
then vanished like a nuclear ghost ninja and handed her the divorce papers on Christmas Day. Here's the full story. It spans from late 2019, and all names are changed. My wife had been the love of my life since high school. We started dating in 1992. Both of us were 17. Now we're 45, and all those years we never separated. She was the only woman I'd ever been with. We got married at 22, right after college, and a year later, our first son was born. I gave her 23 years of my life, built our home, worked myself to exhaustion to give her the life she dreamed of. Of course, we had rough patches, but what couple doesn't? Even the hardest moments made us stronger. That's why discovering her affair felt like getting hit by a truck. In March 2020, I first sensed something was wrong. 2 months before that, we already weren't in a good place. I was recovering from ACL reconstruction. I tore the ligament in fall 2019 and still barely had 55% mobility. That slowed down everything at home. I was on injury leave from my job, couldn't handle many household responsibilities, and the things only I could do had to be pushed onto her. She wasn't happy about it. And our intimacy, which had already decreased before the injury, basically disappeared completely. Around that time, my wife, let's call her Sue, started spending more time with coworkers after work. From November 2019 to March 2020, it became a regular thing. I never questioned it. In 23 years of marriage, she never gave me a single reason to doubt her. She had her friends, I had mine, we had shared friends too. It was never a problem. But sometime in January 2020, things changed. She became distant. Yes, we were struggling, but she had never avoided affectionate touches before. Her hugs, small kisses, even simple closeness, gone. Her phone, which she used constantly anyway, stopped being something she shared with me. Before, she'd show me Pinterest crafts or funny memes. Now she hid the screen, angled it away, held it tighter. Her tone toward me became sharper, like I irritated her just by existing. Then March 2020 hit. The pandemic began, New York shut down. Our jobs were classified as essential, so we kept working. I had just been cleared to return to work after 5 months of rehab, and I was desperate to get back. Months stuck at home, unable to exercise, was torture for someone who trains martial arts and goes to the gym 4 times a week. A week or two into lockdown, my wife said she'd need to stay late at work. I didn't think much of it. With her job, it seemed plausible. But she started staying late every single day. Not an hour or 2, 3 hours or more. She'd come home, head straight to the shower, spend a little time with me, a little time with our 17-year-old son, our older one, 22, lived with his girlfriend, and go to bed. As my knee improved, we resumed intimacy, but she was completely absent, emotionally gone, mentally somewhere else. I noticed immediately. By early April, everything aligned. All the signs pointed to an affair. I needed answers. I researched what to look for, read lists of typical cheating behaviors. She hit nearly every point. Then I dug deeper, looking for actual proof. I started with her social media. Her Facebook looked normal, pictures of us, the kids, friends, and several photos of her after-work hangouts. Some people I recognized, others I didn't. But one guy stood out. He appeared in many photos, always too close to my wife. Hand on her shoulder, hand on her waist. Too familiar for someone I'd never met. He was friends with her on Facebook and followed her on Instagram. So I checked his profile. He had blocked me. A man I didn't know had blocked me, yet was connected to my wife. That was the moment I knew something was seriously wrong. No more denial. She was cheating, and this guy was the one. I needed to know how long it had been going on, so I kept digging all through April and May. We had a shared family mobile plan, so I could access call logs. 2 numbers dominated her call history from October 2019 to April 2020. mine, and an unknown number. A quick Google search confirmed it was him, the same guy from the photos. Let's call him Mark, though I had other names in mind. The picture grew clearer. Many messages were deleted, which meant she was hiding things. I knew she was cheating, but I still lacked hard evidence. So I kept going.
At that point, I knew I needed real evidence. I told my best friend Ozzy about everything I had discovered. He asked if I had confronted her, but I said no, it didn't feel like enough. Then he told me about an app I could install to monitor her messages in real time. I set it up, synced it to our shared phone plan, and waited. Within a few days, I finally saw the proof. Messages between them about how much fun they had the night before and how excited they were to do it again over the weekend. It was like getting punched in the gut. Shocked doesn't even begin to describe it. For the next 2 days, I was completely destroyed. I avoided her on purpose, which she definitely noticed. She tried comforting me and asked what was wrong, but I brushed her off. I couldn't even look at her, the woman I had given 23 years of my life to, the woman I had given everything and more, and she cheated on me with someone only 5 years older than our eldest son. On the third day, I wasn't sad anymore. I was angry. I called Ozzy to tell him my suspicions were confirmed. He asked if I had talked to her yet. I told him no, because I wanted revenge. I didn't just want to divorce her. I wanted to destroy her. I wanted her life to fall apart. I wanted her to feel everything she had made me feel. That would take time, so I made a plan. While researching infidelity, I ran across a quote that stuck with me. The enemy of an affair is unpredictability, or something like that. That became the foundation of my plan. I was going to make her life hell, while secretly preparing my own escape. By early June, I still had the app installed. Almost every night, I collected as much information as I could, watching their conversations. They acted like they were in a full-blown relationship, sexting, romantic messages, sending each other nudes, the whole package. At some point, I stopped reading everything and just archived it all on my private server. Meanwhile, I started doing unusual things. I began leaving the house at weird times. I came home later than she did. When she saw me on my phone and asked what I was doing, I would say, just stuff, and put the phone away. I changed all my account passwords so she couldn't access anything. For context, throughout our entire marriage, we never hid anything from each other. But from the moment her affair began, she changed her Facebook and phone passwords, claiming she had security issues. Perfect excuse for hiding an affair. I told Ozzy about my plan and also confided in my older sister and 2 closest friends, Joey and Nina. These were people I trusted with my life. They swore to keep it secret. Ozzy and I have been friends since childhood. Joey and Nina since high school. Pay attention to Nina. She becomes important later. By July, my wife had become completely paranoid. She started texting and calling me much more often, constantly asking where I was and what I was doing. I saw that the seed of doubt I planted months earlier had finally started to grow. It was especially obvious in her conversations with her lover. She told him she felt confused and worried, said I was becoming cold and distant. The audacity. She suggested they stop meeting at our house because she never knew when I might come home now, which confirmed it. She had been bringing him into our home. Thanks, Sue. In one conversation, the guy asked if she was worried that I might be cheating on her. That made her angry, and I cannot explain to you how much joy and laughter that conversation brought me. My cheating wife arguing with her affair partner about whether she should be upset that her husband might be cheating on her. The irony was delicious. For the record, I never cheated on her. When I left the house, I was usually at Ozzy's or Joey's. We hung out, had drinks, watched fights. Sometimes I was at my sister's with her husband. She's 52, he's 58, like an older brother to me. She told him about my wife's affair, but didn't mention my plan. He tends to gossip, and I couldn't risk it. Jump to October, when things got serious. I had been running my fake affair routine for 3 months.
Sue clearly saw I was pulling away. From the day I started my plan until the day she confronted me, October 20th, 2020, I hadn't touched her once. No hugs, no kisses, no sex. Nothing. Not that she needed it. She was still sleeping with the guy at his place or in motels. That day, she called me at work and asked me to come home right after my shift, saying we needed to talk. I won't lie, part of me thought she might confess. Of course she didn't. Instead, I came home and she asked me if I was unhappy with her. The nerve. She pointed out that I spent too much time away, didn't show affection anymore, and that our sex life had disappeared. She said she worried I was pushing her away because of how she treated me during my knee recovery. Then she asked the funniest question of my life. She asked if I was cheating on her. I collapsed on the floor laughing, a Joker-style laugh. From her perspective, it looked like I was laughing at the idea of being unfaithful. In reality, I was laughing at the absurdity of the situation. I laughed until tears came, rolled around for about 5 minutes before I finally calmed down. Then I sat up, looked her in the eyes for the first time in months, shook my head without answering, kissed the top of her head, and walked away. Later that night, I opened the app to see what she was telling her affair partner. No surprise, they were texting. She wrote, "I know he's cheating on me. I asked him today and he just laughed in my face. He fell on the floor and rolled around for like 5 minutes. He doesn't care about my feelings anymore. I know I lost him. This is karma." The grin on my face must have looked like the Cheshire Cat. She was breaking down. The guy tried comforting her, saying that if he truly loved her, she wouldn't have needed him, and that I hadn't been giving her what she needed. But her tone said everything. She was full of doubt. The sheer audacity. She cheated on me because I couldn't fulfill my duties as a husband due to a real injury, and yet she continued the affair without a second thought.
Almost the whole idea that she might lose me because of another woman shook her to the core. What a coward. During this time, I was also working hard on the second phase of my plan. I was putting my finances in order. Back in September, I met with a family law attorney and started the divorce process, armed with a mountain of evidence I'd collected. In New York, divorces can be filed as fault-based or no fault, and with the amount of proof I had, a fault-based divorce was practically guaranteed to corner her legally. My lawyer advised me to organize all financial documents in preparation for splitting our assets. I went further. I secretly withdrew all the money from our joint account and transferred it into my personal one. I also began looking for an apartment as part of Phase 2. By November, I didn't just maintain my cold behavior, I amplified it. This is where my friend Nina comes into the story. For context, Nina and Sue had never been close. I met Nina in my first year of high school, 2 years before I even knew Sue. From the moment Sue and I started dating, she viewed Nina as a threat because Nina was my closest female friend. Sue never said it directly, but anyone around us could see she didn't trust Nina, and Nina, for her part, was never a big fan of Sue. Early in my relationship with Sue, Nina pointed out how Sue kept inserting herself into our friend group while I never did that with her friends. Nina knew exactly why Sue acted that way: jealousy. While Sue's entire friend circle consisted only of women, besides her affair partner, of course, Nina remained the only woman in my circle of friends. Nina had been stuck abroad for a while due to the pandemic, but she finally returned to New York on November 3rd. Ozzy, Joey, his wife, who was also Nina's sister, Nina, and I decided to celebrate her return with drinks and dinner at Joey's place. Being the clever fox she is, Nina came up with a devilish idea: recreate a few photos in the same style as the ones I'd seen of Sue and her affair partner months ago and post them on my Facebook page. So we did exactly that. On November 5th, Sue found out. I guess some mutual friends saw the pictures and noticed how close Nina and I looked. It completely rattled Sue. She still firmly believed I was cheating on her, and she probably wanted to accuse Nina, but she couldn't since Nina had spent almost the entire year in Europe. That didn't stop Sue from confronting me that night, upset that, in her words, I was being too affectionate in those photos. And that gave me the perfect opportunity to land the first blow. I told her, "How about those photos of you and that guy from last year? He looked pretty affectionate too, and I didn't lose my mind over it." She froze. That was the first time I'd ever mentioned the affair partner by name. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head as she scrambled for an excuse. Up until then, she didn't even know I had seen the photos. That's how rarely I use Facebook. She eventually muttered something like, "He's like that with everyone. He's just friendly. I know how it looks, but nothing happened between us. I'm sorry if the photos upset you. I'll delete them." "No," I said. "The photos aren't the problem. The problem is that you slept with him for an entire year while lying to me about working late and meeting friends. That's what upset me." From that night on, she became unbelievably clingy, overly affectionate, constantly trying to hold me, kiss me, touch me. It was annoying. I ignored her every chance I got. Meanwhile, I kept archiving her messages with the affair partner. By that point, I was completely numb. Any desire to save our marriage had died the day I launched phase 1 of my plan. She texted him that things had gotten worse, that she didn't know what to do, and that she felt like I hated her. And I did. Deeply. And then came the turning point. She told him she couldn't see him anymore. The guilt was crushing her. She felt like karma was suffocating her, and she couldn't risk losing me. She claimed she deeply loved him, but was still in love with me and needed to save her marriage. "No, sweetheart, you were about 8 months too late." The guy freaked out, begging her not to leave him. He insisted I didn't love her like he did, that she was making a mistake, and that she couldn't just throw away what they had. Throughout November and December, Sue was stuck in limbo. She desperately tried to figure out what I was thinking, but she still couldn't determine whether I was cheating or not. Meanwhile, the affair partner kept bombarding her with messages every day. She just ignored them. I noticed her checking her phone constantly, then quickly hiding it. By then, phase 2 of my plan was complete. Divorce papers ready, a studio apartment in the Bronx leased for 2 years, and all our money sitting safely in my personal account. I was ready to strike. Then came Thanksgiving. My older son and his girlfriend hosted a small dinner for close family. It was me, Sue, our younger son, her parents, and the girlfriend's parents. The food was incredible. The girl is studying culinary arts and cooked everything herself. To maintain the appearance that Sue and I were fine, I showed her a bit of affection that evening. A kiss on the cheek, a gentle hug, my arm around her shoulders. She was thrilled. It was the first time I had touched her in almost 2 months since that night in October when she confronted me. I won't lie, it made my skin crawl, but I had to keep up appearances. Pulling away in front of our sons and their guests would have raised questions. Our younger son stayed the night with his brother, and Sue and I went home. On the way, she thanked me for being so kind and said, "I don't know what's going on with you lately, honey, but I'm here." I just had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. I simply said, "I know. I just need some time." That night, for the first time since spring, we slept together. I thought, screw it. Why not enjoy myself one last time before I erase her from my life? I won't go into detail, but it wasn't making love. When I finished, she lay there staring at the ceiling like she'd just been hit by a truck. No cuddling, no tenderness, nothing.
After it was over, I simply got up, took a shower, and went to sleep in my office. What unsettled her most was the fact that I used a condom for the first time in 20 damn years. She was clearly confused, but she didn't ask questions. And of course, I wasn't about to sleep with her unprotected after knowing she'd been doing exactly that with her lover for months. The next morning, I woke up and immediately checked the tracking app. For the first time in weeks, she had replied to him. The guy completely poured his heart out, confessed his love, told her she was wasting her time trying to reignite a dead flame with me, claimed she had been trapped in a cage for 23 years and deserved a man who truly valued her. And remember, this guy is only 5 years older than our son. She was ready to destroy our marriage and the home we built for him. She responded almost exactly as she had before. Told him she loved him, enjoyed their time together, but couldn't lose me. Said I was still the love of her life, though he would always have a place in her heart. She suggested staying friends if he wanted, but their physical relationship had to end. He begged her to meet one more time, and of course, she agreed to one last goodbye. Who am I to judge? I'd done the same with her the night before. Naturally, I added all of this to the archive I'd been building. On December 4th, the third and final phase of my plan began. I already had the divorce documents in hand and my new apartment secured. The next step was to start quietly moving my belongings out. But first, I had to tell our sons. On Friday evening, I asked my oldest to come home. I took both boys into my office and told them, without going into graphic detail, that their mother had been cheating on me for over a year and that I would soon be filing for divorce. My younger son took it especially hard. He'd just gone through his own heartbreak 4 months earlier when his first girlfriend cheated on him. Watching his heart break again because his own mother could do something like this, it was brutal. My older son handled it more calmly. He offered to let his brother stay with him until things settled down, and I agreed. We packed my younger son's things, and before leaving, he asked if I would be okay. I told him, "Yes, son, I'll be fine, and you will be too. We'll get through this, I promise." They left, and the hardest part was behind me. Now it was time to arm the nuclear payload. When my older son was at work, I used the spare key he had given me to start taking a few things, items Sue wouldn't notice missing right away. I also bought a new phone, a new number, and sent the updated contacts to the people who needed them: Ozzy, Joey, Nina, my sons, my sister, and my mother. Meanwhile, Sue was left in the dark. She kept minimal contact with her lover, but the emotional bond was still there. All the while, I continued gathering data: every message, every call log, every picture, every recording. I printed everything. I must have spent over $1,500 on printer cartridges, folders, labels, boxes, the whole setup. I organized everything chronologically from the beginning of their affair to their most recent exchange. By December 16th, it filled 14 folders. I boxed them up, wrapped them like Christmas presents, and addressed them to my mother, her parents, her 2 sisters, her brother, her HR department. Oh right, he worked at the same company, which had strict rules about coworker relationships. Several of her friends, the lover's parents, and the lover himself. I shipped the entire collection on December 16th. Estimated arrival, December 22 to 24. Perfect timing. Then came Christmas Eve. Sue got home at the usual time. No idea whether she had seen her lover. I'd stopped checking the app after the 18th. She showered, spent a little time with me on the couch, then went to bed. The final stage was approaching. The bomb I'd been assembling since June was ready to explode. In the middle of the night, I woke up, took one of the remaining folders, wrapped it like a gift, and slid the divorce papers into the inside cover, and left it on my side of the bed with a note that said, "Merry Christmas." Next to it, I left my old phone and my lawyer's business card. I packed the last essentials into 2 backpacks and walked out of the house I'd lived in for 23 years. That was 1 week ago. To Sue, I've completely vanished. She's blocked on Facebook, but oddly, she hasn't blocked me, so I can still watch everything unfold. It's glorious. All the packages arrived. Sue is getting absolutely torn apart. Her younger sister went off on her. Her parents are furious. My mom annihilated her. I knew my mother could be harsh, but what she said to Sue was downright savage. Sue is desperately trying to find out where I am, but the people who know aren't saying a word. Her Facebook is full of posts begging me to contact her. She must know I can see it, but I won't respond to anything without my lawyer present. She has no way to twist this to make me the villain. And according to our mutual friend, who works at the same company, both she and her affair partner are being put on unpaid leave starting tomorrow. So she will probably begin 2021 unemployed. As for the remaining 2 folders, one went to my attorney as final evidence, and I kept the last one to burn at Joey's place once the divorce is finalized. Do I feel guilty? Not even a little. For 23 years I was loyal to this woman. I gave her the home she dreamed of, the family she wanted, the life I thought we both deserved. I loved her unconditionally. I never betrayed her, never even considered breaking my vows. Whenever something felt off in our marriage, I talked with her. We solved problems as best we could. She chose the comfort of another man's bed instead of coming to me and saying she was unhappy with our intimacy. The moment she crawled into bed with that younger guy, she ended our marriage. So no, I feel zero remorse. Let her burn in hell for all I care. The worst I can lose is the house, the car, and maybe a couple $100s a month. But since this is a fault-based divorce in New York and my evidence is overwhelming, I likely won't be paying alimony at all.
Update 1. Christmas. Christmas was the first full day I spent in my new apartment. I'm still getting the place set up. There are a few things I want to buy, but overall, it already feels like home. I'll be living here for at least the next 2 years. My sons and my older son's girlfriend came over and spent most of the day with me. She brought homemade sweets and cooked a great dinner. I finally had the chance to talk with my boys calmly, something I hadn't done in a long time, and it felt good. My older sister stopped by too, bringing more food and spent a few hours with us. It was the first time in almost a year she saw her nephews. Having them all around kept me stable emotionally. If I'd been alone, I probably would have just gotten drunk until I blacked out. Everyone left around 8 p.m., and afterward I decided to visit Joey and his wife Claudia. I stayed with them for a couple of hours, had a drink, then went home. The next important moment came on December 29th, 2020. Around midday, I got a message from Nina asking if I was free that evening. Of course I was. We agreed to meet after work. She drove over, and we went to a small diner near my office in New York. Restaurants were still running at 25% capacity because of the pandemic, but it wasn't hard to find a table since most people preferred staying home. Once we ordered, Nina laid everything out. I already suspected what she was going to say. She admitted she'd like me since we were teenagers, but never had the chance to say anything because Sue got to me before she ever could. For context, I've known Nina 2 years longer than I've known Sue. Back in school, it was the 4 of us, me, Ozzy, Joey, and Nina. We were the misfits who didn't fit anywhere. Nina struggled with her weight then, was diabetic, and looked like a goth girl straight out of a comic book. Cool, but invisible to guys. Yet we always had chemistry. Now, Nina is a personal trainer and yoga instructor. She went from awkward outsider to, honestly, a stunning woman. So we agreed that once my divorce is finalized, we'll start officially dating. And yes, we slept together that night. She came back to my new place, and we had an amazing time. Do I feel guilty? Not even close. Nina has been a better friend to me than Sue was for almost 25 years. She supported me through everything, and I learned that she even stepped aside back then so I could build a life with Sue. That level of selflessness hit me hard. Maybe it sounds like I'm justifying myself, but to me it felt right, and I want to see where things go with Nina. Now about yesterday, the day I met with my wife and her attorney to discuss the divorce. 2 weeks had passed since I vanished from Sue's life. On Monday, I got a call from her lawyer's office saying they'd scheduled a meeting for January 6th, 2021. The day before the meeting, I met with my attorney to go over my terms. In short, I want a divorce on the grounds of adultery, a full split of marital assets. I sell her my share of the house, she can keep it. We each keep our cars. I keep my cabin in Pennsylvania. Because of her cheating, she gets no spousal support. Our younger son chooses where he lives, and it'll probably be with me. Then came Wednesday. I walked into my lawyer's office dressed like Johnny Cash. Inside were Sue and her attorney. She looked terrible, completely worn down. I kept a stone-cold face. I won't bore you with the legal back and forth. Her lawyer offered reconciliation terms. I rejected them almost instantly. Eventually, we settled on a separation agreement that will lead to a no-fault divorce. The only change, I'll pay her $653 a month temporarily to cover utilities until she finds a job. Yes, she was fired for her affair, just like the guy she cheated with. My income is high enough that the payment won't hurt me, even if she drags her job search out, and she has enough savings to survive for a while. After a year, she's on her own. Honestly, that's a small price to finally remove her from my life. The divorce should take around 3 months, so by early April, I'll be free. After the meeting, I stepped outside. Sue followed me and asked to talk. I allowed it. She held herself together in the office, but once we were outside, she completely broke down, full meltdown. She apologized over and over, saying she never wanted things to end this way. She said she didn't expect to fall for that guy, but when she thought I'd been cheating on her, she panicked and betrayed me. She asked if I could ever forgive her, and maybe years from now we could try again, because she can't imagine living without me. I told her she'd better start imagining it, because this was the last time she would ever see me or hear my voice. I reminded her that our younger son is old enough to choose his own path. I told her she had half my life and every ounce of love I had, and she threw it away for a fling. I said there was zero chance of forgiveness. Every bit of love I had for her died during the months she whispered, "I love you," to another man instead of telling me our marriage needed help. I told her I loved the woman she used to be, but I hated the person standing in front of me now. She was sobbing on a Manhattan sidewalk, making a scene. People stared, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to humiliate her. I'd already destroyed her social and professional life. I just needed to say what I came to say. Then I put in my earbuds, turned around, and walked away. Later that night, her father called me to apologize. He said he was ashamed of her behavior and thanked me for being a good husband. I'll miss the man. He was like a father to me after my own dad died, but there's no point staying connected to her family now. After the call, I updated my Facebook status to divorced. Yes, it's not legally final yet, but emotionally it's over. People started messaging me right away, and I told them the truth. I filed for divorce because of infidelity. Nina called me immediately, surprised how fast things were moving. She didn't realize how far along everything already was. I asked her to come over, and she did. We slept together again, but this time she stayed the night. We talked until morning, and I haven't felt that kind of connection in years. Nina understands me. I can't get enough of her presence. Some might say I'm moving on too fast. Maybe. But my marriage ended the moment she let another man touch her. I've been emotionally done for a long time. So that's where I am. My divorce is underway. I'm starting something new with Nina. And despite saying once I'd never remarry, that was before Nina told me how she felt, and I can't deny I feel the same. We're taking it slow, and we won't go public until everything with Sue is legally finalized. As for Sue, I don't care what happens to her. She can keep the old house, move her boyfriend in, do whatever. I'll get my half of the money throughout 2021, 4 payments, and I'll never have to see her again. To everyone who's offered support and encouragement, thank you. It means more than you know.
Update 2. My wife almost died yesterday. Last night, something happened that I honestly never expected. Since only my closest friends, my sons, my older sister, and my mother have my new contact information, and since I blocked my wife everywhere, she hasn't had any way to reach me since I disappeared from her life on Christmas Eve. Some of our mutual friends, however, can still contact me. I was in my apartment when I got a message from one of the few mutual friends who didn't turn his back on her after I exposed the affair. When I replied, he told me that he had stopped by to check on her and found her unconscious in the bedroom, foam at her mouth with 2 empty pill bottles nearby. She's now in the ICU in critical but stable condition. Doctors said she will most likely survive, but she won't be all right for a long time. That friend begged me to come. Her parents and sisters were also at the hospital. I'm guessing they were called because the hospital couldn't reach me due to my old number still being listed as her emergency contact. I simply said no. She is no longer my responsibility. She chose the easy way out instead of facing the consequences of the pain and humiliation she brought on herself by destroying our 23-year marriage. My friend insisted I tell my sons. I did, but made it clear that if they wanted to visit their mother, I wouldn't judge. She is still their mom. But I'm done. They were surprised by how firm I was, but they accepted it. Now that the news has spread, many of the same people who condemned her weeks ago are suddenly full of sympathy, telling me I should be by her side, that despite everything she did, I should support her through this. I was also told her affair partner tried to visit her this morning, but he wasn't allowed in because he isn't family. So now the pressure is on me, but I feel nothing for this woman anymore. Whatever love I had for her died months ago, during the time she was telling another man she loved him. Her actions killed every last emotion I had left. She betrayed me. She chose nearly a year-long affair with someone only 5 years older than our son over our entire life together. And now, instead of dealing with the fallout of her choices, she takes the most selfish route possible. Even now, when she will likely survive, she instantly becomes the victim again. People who condemned her are already forgiving her. Meanwhile, I'm going to be painted as the cold, heartless ex-husband who refused to show up. Her father called me. He apologized, said he respected my decision, and admitted he raised her better. He's the only one who hasn't tried to guilt-trip me. I keep asking myself whether she did this because she truly broke mentally or because she made a calculated, desperate move to win people back. Maybe that sounds cruel, but I honestly don't know this woman anymore. To be clear, I will not go see her. She lost the right to my concern the day she let another man put his hands on her. I know some of you will judge me. I don't care. If you were in my position, you'd see things differently. Some might argue that I caused her breakdown by leaving the way I did, by letting her believe I was cheating on her while she was actively cheating on me. Maybe that contributed, but it doesn't erase her choices. I gave her half my life. She betrayed me entirely for her own selfish reasons. She told me herself I had nothing to do with her decision to cheat. She did it because she wanted to. If refusing to visit her in the hospital makes me a bad person, then so be it. I'm choosing myself now. My responsibility for her ended the day we signed the separation agreement. After 23 years and 2 kids, I realized I never truly knew her. I feel no sympathy. I never will. She can rot in whatever dark pit she's dug for herself. I'm done. Quick update. Her father told me she has been transferred from the ICU to the psychiatric ward. She's conscious and mentally stable enough to speak, but still extremely weak. He also told me she asked whether I came to see her, and when he said no, she looked devastated. He said he'll give me updates only if I ask, out of respect for my boundaries. I also arranged a therapy appointment for my 17-year-old son. His first session is this Monday.
Update 3. The End and Goodbye. Update 3. The End and Goodbye. On April 13th, exactly 1 month ago, Sue officially became my ex-wife. At first, my lawyer told me it would happen on the 18th, but partly because New York started loosening COVID restrictions, everything was finalized a few days earlier. My lawyer Jeff called me on April 12th and asked me to come in the next day. When I arrived, he handed me the notice confirming the completion of the divorce and shook my hand. I couldn't just walk away, so I hugged him and thanked him for everything he had done for me.
On the way home, I kept replaying the last 24 years of my life in my head. Every memory, every chapter of our story. When I walked into my apartment, it finally hit me. I collapsed onto the floor, and all the emotions I had been holding inside poured out. I hadn't cried like that in years, but these weren't tears of sadness, not at all. My soul finally felt free after being trapped in the deepest, darkest pit. That evening, I called my older son. I briefly told him everything was finalized, that his mother and I were no longer married. He asked how I felt. I think he could hear in my voice that I had been crying, and I told him I was okay. Then my 17-year-old took the phone, and we talked for almost an hour and a half. My older son and his fiancée are taking great care of him, and he, like me, continues seeing a therapist. I won't go into details, but he still has a lot of work ahead of him, especially regarding how he views relationships. Later that night, Nina came over. I told her the news, and she just wrapped her arms around my waist and held me while I cried again. When I calmed down, she told me that no matter what happens, she will never betray me and will love me with all her heart. I know she meant every word. Some may judge me, but I don't regret the life I built with Sue, despite everything she did. She gave me 2 wonderful sons. But now it's clear I chose the wrong woman. Over the past 4.5 months, Nina has given me so much and asked nothing in return. All she wants is for me to be in her life. After the divorce was finalized, a few unexpected things happened. For example, AK contacted me. Turns out he saw this story after it blew up online and immediately recognized himself in it. The first thing he did was apologize. He told me what happened after his mother received the folder I mailed her. She essentially disowned him. His mother, a deeply devout Catholic who goes to church 3 times a week, went ballistic when she learned her son destroyed a marriage that lasted almost 25 years. She kicked him out that same day, and within a week, when his employer received the folder as well, he was fired. Since then, he's been sleeping on friends' couches and trying to find work. I admit I could have completely destroyed this guy, but I didn't. I asked when he last spoke to Sue. He said months ago. The last time they talked, Sue told him to forget about her and move on. At least on that, she didn't lie. He kept answering my questions, surprisingly honestly. Maybe he was looking for some kind of redemption. Much of what he said matched what I already suspected. The conversation lasted around 20 minutes. He apologized again. I told him this, I'm copying it directly from our messages. You're a 27-year-old man who now has to live knowing your own mother hates you for destroying a marriage almost as old as you are. I know you messaged me because your conscience is eating you alive, but I'm not here to comfort you. When I was 27, I was building a future. You are homeless, jobless, a homewrecker. If you're smart, you'll learn from this. If not, you'll stay a failure until you reach my age, if you even make it that far. I'd wish you luck, but you don't need luck. You need to rebuild your life. Then I ended the conversation and blocked him. It wasn't what he expected, and I could have been crueler, but I think those words will stay with him for a long time. Another important event, as of May 4th, 2021, Nina now carries my last name. For the past 2 months, we talked a lot about where we want our relationship to go. Nina made it clear she won't be with anyone but me and wants to take my name. She wants to be my wife, and she wants me to adopt her daughter, let's call her Anna, as my own. I adore this little girl. She just turned 6 months last month, and she absolutely loves me. I'm the first father figure in her life. Her biological father abandoned them when she was 4. Nina never introduced Anna to any man she dated after her divorce, unless he had long-term potential. Clearly, I do, and I have experience raising kids. By the way, Anna and my younger son get along incredibly well. Their sibling-like bond is sweet and heartwarming. My therapist said this is definitely a good sign. So last Monday, we went to City Hall and made it official. It took 24 hours to get the marriage certificate. Telling everyone was funny. My buddy Ozzy said, "Who would have guessed?" My older sister said, "I'm taking bets on when the baby announcement is coming." We thought we were keeping the relationship a secret, but apparently everyone already figured it out. Yes, some will say we married too quickly. And yes, I said in comments that I'd never get married again. But that was before Nina confessed her feelings to me. She told me through tears of happiness that she never thought she'd have a chance to be with me. She described in detail how she had felt about me for the past 25 years and how, even while married, she regretted that Sue had won. I had no idea how deeply this ran for her. She even admitted she had moments where the thought of an affair crossed her mind, but she refused to become a homewrecker. And through all those years, she gave me so much and asked so little in return. Even the woman I married and had 2 kids with never showed me the kind of love Nina has given me. I'd be a fool not to give her my last name. Now she has it, and we're in the early stages of the adoption process for Anna. As for Sue, I haven't spoken to her since the last time I was in our house almost 4 months ago, but mutual friends occasionally update me. One of them, a realtor, told me he sold the house and he gave her a job as an administrative assistant at his firm. Because of that, he canceled the alimony I was obligated to pay her while she was unemployed. She now lives in a small apartment near the office. He helped her find that too. She's only a shadow of the woman she used to be. She's barely gained any weight back, keeps to herself, goes to work, does her tasks, and talks to no one except that friend. Probably because, as you know, her workplace friendships are what led to everything in the first place. I last heard about her in late March. I thanked the friend for looking after her, but told him I no longer need updates. She's no longer my responsibility. I'm sure she already knows about Nina and I, since some mutual friends have commented on it. And since my youngest will be an adult in a year, I have no reason to ever speak to her again. And I won't. That's it. My story is over. I sincerely thank everyone who wished me well.
My wife and her best friend accused me of cheating and lost their minds when they found out I wasn't. I'm 31. My wife is 29. Last year we had a baby. The birth was traumatic and my wife developed postpartum depression. Originally, she planned to return to work after giving birth, but the challenges were so intense that we decided to wait until our daughter turned 1 and then reassess the situation. She attends weekly appointments with a psychiatrist. Since my wife stayed home full-time, I had to work more. We discussed this in advance before making the decision. A few weeks ago, my boss offered me a project that required a lot of overtime. It was a fantastic opportunity to earn extra money and advance my career. I talked it over with my wife, and she agreed that I should take it. For 4 weeks while I worked on the project, my mother-in-law and my wife's best friend, Jessie, helped with some of the responsibilities I usually handled. Jessie is a stay-at-home mom with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. She started coming over during the day to watch the kids alongside my wife. 3 weeks into the project, it became clear we'd need a few more weeks to finish. That evening, I came home and spoke to my wife about it. She said it was fine. Over the next few days, however, she became very cold. I didn't think much of it, as her mood swings over the past few months weren't unusual, and I tried not to take it personally. During the last week of the project, I came home one evening and saw Jessie still at our house. I greeted her and my wife, then went to check on our daughter. Before I reached her room, I overheard Jessie say something like, "He doesn't even stop to say hi to you. That's definitely a sign." I turned around and asked what she meant. My wife immediately started crying, while Jessie accused me of cheating. Jessie said I must hate my wife because of her postpartum depression, and that she wasn't attractive to me anymore since gaining weight after pregnancy. None of this was true. I've been doing my best to support my wife through her depression and take care of our family, and I think she looks beautiful as she is.
She simply wasn't in the mood for intimacy, and I didn't pressure her. Then Jessie demanded to see my phone. I said no. She claimed that was proof I was guilty. I told my wife she could check my phone if she wanted. She nodded. Something inside me broke. It hurt that she believed I was having an affair and that she didn't trust me after everything we'd been through. She looked through my phone. There was nothing incriminating. Then Jessie accused me of deleting evidence and started shouting, waking our daughter. I told her to leave the house. Eventually, she left, and I went to calm our daughter, while my wife sat on the couch crying. Once our daughter was asleep again, I sat next to my wife and tried talking to her. She admitted she'd been worried ever since I started working overtime. I reminded her we had discussed the project beforehand, and she agreed I should take it. She said it was suspicious that the project timeline had been extended. I explained that sometimes these things happen, and showed her messages, emails, and payroll records proving the overtime. She apologized for doubting me and said she trusted me again. It was just that Jessie kept telling her these things were signs. I asked my wife why she trusted Jessie more than me and why she didn't come to me first with her concerns. She had no answer. A couple of weeks later, the project ended. I've reduced my workload a bit to spend more time with my wife and daughter, but I feel completely drained trying to accommodate her and anxious because deep down I know she doesn't fully trust me. I wonder what will happen next time I take on a project or have a work assignment, or if I go on a business trip. Will this cycle of accusations happen again? I've tried bringing it up a few times, but my wife says it's not the right time. She's tired and sad. I try to respect her feelings, but I can't help wondering if there's room for my feelings in our family anymore. I don't know what to do in this situation. Does anyone have advice on how to move forward?
Update, 4 days later. That evening, I approached my wife and told her I wanted to find a therapist. I didn't connect it to her accusations or anything specific. I just said I was struggling. She shrugged. She said, "Do whatever you want." The next day, I returned from work to find our bedroom and my home office completely ransacked. Papers and personal items were scattered everywhere. My wife was nowhere to be found, and our daughter was crying in her room. She had left her alone and turned off her phone. I immediately tried calling her parents and a few friends, but no one had seen her. Growing more anxious, I called my mom to see if she could watch our daughter while I searched. Before my mom could arrive, my wife came back, driving the car. Jessie, her friend, stayed in the car and hadn't entered the house since I had kicked her out because she was insulted by my behavior. My wife walked in, visibly upset and in tears. I asked what had happened, initially fearing that someone had broken in. Instead, she started yelling at me, accusing me of cheating, and claiming that my visits to a psychiatrist were a cover to see a mistress. I tried to calm her and insisted that none of it was true, but she attacked me and broke my nose. After realizing what she had done, she slumped onto the couch in a dazed state, staring blankly at the wall. I quickly went to my daughter's room and locked the door. I called my mom, who was already on her way, to explain the situation, and also reached out to my mother-in-law to ask her to come and look after my wife. I packed a bag for our daughter, and my mom and I left with her. My wife didn't even look up. We dropped our daughter off at my father's house and then went to the emergency room to treat my nose. In the process, I stained my mom's new Subaru with blood. For now, my daughter and I are staying with my parents, while my wife is with her parents. I'm considering filing a restraining order against Jessie. My wife and I are separating. I still love her, but I cannot live with someone who causes me harm and could potentially endanger our child. I am holding off on divorce, hoping she will receive the necessary treatment so we might repair our relationship. My in-laws mentioned that they are considering inpatient care at a local facility. I have also documented the entire chaotic incident in case it becomes relevant for custody proceedings.
My heart aches because I know this isn't really my wife, it's her mental illness. But I have to protect myself, our daughter, and give my wife space to recover. I hope this is the right decision. Ultimately, I concluded that to safeguard my daughter, I must file a police report. I was heading to the station when, 3 days later, my wife died early Monday morning. She had become convinced by her friend Jessie that I was having an affair, which was entirely false. She lost her sanity. She was with her parents, who had planned to admit her to a hospital for treatment. On Sunday evening, she had come to my parents' house, demanding to take our daughter. She had left her alone for a few hours previously and had attacked me. I refused. I offered supervised time with the child in the presence of both sets of parents, but she refused, upset, and eventually left. A few hours later, she crashed her parents' car into a tree and died. Jessie visited yesterday, crying, to see me and our daughter. She claimed she planned to speak at my wife's funeral and that she had arranged it with my in-laws, but informed me out of courtesy. I told her she would not be allowed to speak. We argued, and she left, saying that I wasn't the only person who loved my wife. I spoke with my in-laws, who insist that Jessie should be allowed to speak because she had known my wife since childhood, and they are close to her. I fear that giving in to their pressure could damage my relationship with them. At the same time, the thought of Jessie standing at my wife's funeral makes me physically sick. I don't think I could bear hearing her, knowing she had taken pleasure in my wife's mental decline and had left our daughter alone. Yet I don't trust my own judgment right now. My mind is clouded, my parents are divided over what to do, and I don't have the energy to reach out to friends. So once again, I am asking, what should I do?
My father gave my spoiled brother $120,000 for medical school, but refused to help my business. Now they're begging me for money because my brother's life is in danger. I'm 21 years old, and before explaining what's happening now, I need to give some background about my family so everything makes sense. My parents divorced when I was in middle school. At the time, I didn't know the real reason, but even as a child, I could feel that something was deeply wrong between them. There was constant tension in the house. They lived together, but there was no love. When I saw other families, I could tell they were happy. Ours never was. I have an older brother named Eric. You'd think growing up in a broken family would bring siblings closer together, but for us, it did the opposite. For reasons I still don't fully understand, my brother always resented me. From a very young age, he took every opportunity to humiliate me. Over time, my parents started taking sides. My mother usually defended me, while my father always sided with Eric. My brother is 4 years older than me, and he made my childhood miserable. He was cruel, aggressive, and never missed a chance to gang up on me with his friends. I was smaller and weaker, so my only option was to run to my mother. That only made things worse. I was labeled a mommy boy, weak and pathetic in their eyes. My mother tried to discipline him, but it never helped. My father would step in and tell her that I needed to toughen up, that I had to learn to fight back if I wanted to become a man. But I didn't want to become a man by his definition. I just wanted a peaceful life. And it felt like my father and brother hated that idea. They constantly tried to make my life harder. My mother did her best to protect me, but she couldn't be everywhere at once. She was a homemaker, raising 2 children and managing the household. She simply didn't have the ability to stop the bullying every time it happened. So I grew up learning to endure it, to keep quiet, and to let things go instead of fighting back. When I was in 8th grade, my mother sat me down and told me she and my father were separating. By then, I was old enough to understand that there were serious reasons and that it was probably for the best. She didn't tell me exactly why at the time. I assumed my father was just an unbearable person to live with and that she had finally had enough. Years later, when I was already in high school, I learned the truth. My mother had found messages on my father's phone between him and his secretary. That betrayal was the final straw.
She had endured a lot, but infidelity was something she couldn't forgive. That day, we had a long, honest conversation. She told me something that shattered me. My father never truly loved me. He never wanted a second child. When she became pregnant with me, he pushed back hard. At the time, he was just starting his business, and money was tight. Paying bills was already difficult, and one child felt like a heavy financial burden. A second child seemed impossible. My mother refused to give me up. She even threatened divorce. They had a nanny back then because my mother worked before I was born. She suggested continuing to work and borrowing money from her own father, my grandfather, until my father's business became stable, then paying it back. But my father absolutely refused to take money from my grandfather. Instead, he agreed to a second child only on one condition. My mother would quit her job and stay at home. He assumed she would refuse and choose abortion instead. She didn't, and from that moment on, their relationship began to fall apart. My mother admitted that both of them could have handled the situation better, but the way my father started resenting me, treating me badly simply for being born, filled her with guilt. She never tried to reconcile with him after that. She told me she blamed herself for my horrible childhood and apologized, saying she should have left him much earlier. She stayed because she believed divorce would harm us, especially my brother and me. Ironically, staying only made everything worse. Eventually, she had to leave anyway, but by then the damage was much deeper. Part of her still loved my father. Even after he began treating me badly, she hoped he would change. He never did. He disappointed her again and again, growing more distant until he finally cheated on her with his secretary. I love my mother, I truly do, but I believe she should have been honest with me much earlier. She only told me all of this when I was about to graduate, even though they divorced years before, while I was still in middle school.
Unfortunately, I had to spend every weekend with my father. That was the custody arrangement my parents agreed on after the divorce. I stayed with my father on weekends while my brother stayed with my mother. It was considered easier that way. I hated being around my father, and I hated being around my brother even more. During the divorce, I made it very clear that I did not want to spend time with my father and my brother at the same time. That would have been a complete nightmare for me. My mother agreed, and her lawyer made sure the custody terms required me to spend as little time with my father as possible. For the most part, my brother and I were raised by her. Despite that, we still had to spend holidays together. Those gatherings were always awful. After the divorce, my father started openly dating his secretary, and my mother couldn't stand it. To his credit, he didn't bring her to family holidays, but my mother knew the truth, so the tension was always there. Still, we were forced to tolerate it because my father insisted, and my mother had no real choice. She had already created enough distance between herself, my father, my brother, and me. We tried to pretend we were still a family, that some kind of bond still existed. On the surface, we acted civil, but deep down, none of us truly loved one another. My brother and I each chose one parent, and our parents did the same. It was wrong on every level. Looking back, it's fair to say my family was completely dysfunctional, and my childhood was deeply unsettling. Even after I learned the full truth in my senior year of high school, I kept in contact with my father. My mother told me that he was supposed to pay for my college education, which meant I needed to maintain a decent relationship with him. That was the main reason she hadn't told me everything earlier. She was afraid I'd cut him off and lose my chance to go to college. My mother only started working again after the divorce, so she didn't have the savings to pay for the college I dreamed of attending. My father was my only option. It was exhausting, but I tried to stay polite and neutral with him. In the end, it was all pointless. There was no college fund waiting for me, and my father continued to treat me poorly and humiliate me whenever he could. A few months before graduation, several friends and I made a decision that changed everything. Instead of going to college, we decided to start our own business. It was a massive risk. We were all 18, with almost no experience.
but we were passionate about what we wanted to build, and we didn't believe college would bring us any closer to success. The idea was mine at first. What started as a joke slowly became something serious. We realized we genuinely wanted to do this. We decided to launch a clothing and accessories brand because we felt the local market was completely outdated. Most stores either sold cheap, mass-produced items from huge corporations or were tiny shops that had no understanding of how young people actually wanted to dress. My friends and I constantly struggled to find clothes that matched our style. Either we were stuck shopping at thrift stores or dressing like our fathers. At first, we laughed about it, but eventually we noticed that many people our age felt exactly the same way. That's how our brand was born. Looking back, I'm proud of how far we've come since then. I don't regret skipping college. I truly believe we made the right decision. The three of us spent months planning everything, creating a detailed business strategy. Two of us focused on clothing design, which came naturally since we were good at drawing and deeply interested in fashion. The other two handled the business side. My role was finding investors, and that was by far the hardest part. We were just a group of 18-year-olds with no formal education, no business degree, no fashion background. All we had was enthusiasm. It sounds naive, but we were stubborn and fully committed. For weeks, I didn't tell anyone. Eventually, I couldn't hide it from my mother anymore and told her everything. At first, she was worried and urged me to at least get some kind of education first. I told her I was confident in my choice and that all I needed was her support. She accepted it, but warned me that convincing my father to help would be nearly impossible. He disliked men who showed interest in anything he considered feminine. If he found out I was getting into the fashion industry, she believed he might stop speaking to me altogether. Still, we needed money. Every investor we contacted turned us down. Most didn't even agree to meet with us. They said no immediately, and honestly, I understood why. The only people who might even consider helping were friends and family. I realized that quickly. About 2 months before graduation, I decided to talk to my father about funding the business.
My friends had already spoken to their parents. After a lot of persuasion, all of them agreed to invest and help us. My father, however, was the most difficult case, and I knew it from the start. First, I had to tell him that I hadn't applied to college at all. Instead, my friends and I had decided to work on our own brand. That was what we wanted to do, and that was what I needed my college fund money for. When I told him I wasn't going to college, he didn't care. He said it didn't matter to him what I did with my life. But when I mentioned using the money from my college fund, he told me there was no money set aside for my education. He said he truly didn't care what I ended up doing. That was the moment I learned the truth. There had never been a college fund for me. Everything he had saved had already been spent on my brother, who went to medical school. My brother started medical school 4 years before I was supposed to graduate. I knew medical school was expensive, but I assumed my father's business was doing well enough to support both of us. What I didn't know was that my brother wasn't only taking money for tuition, he was also receiving huge sums to support a lavish lifestyle, even though he was supposed to be studying to become a doctor. My father happily gave him everything he asked for. He told me that when my brother left for medical school, he had written him a check and handed over all the money he had saved throughout his entire life. The amount was massive, nearly $120,000, and he gave it all away without hesitation. From that moment on, he lived only on his salary, and that didn't bother him at all. He admitted that he never expected me to go to college and believed he had been right, even though my reasons were completely different from what he imagined. Because of that, he never bothered saving anything for my education and didn't feel the need to tell me there was no fund. Then he said something that still echoes in my head. He told me he considered Eric the smart son and thought I was too stupid to even try applying to college. According to him, I had proven him right by skipping applications and starting a business instead, exactly what he had always expected from me. At first, I thought he was exaggerating or trying to provoke me.
But after a few minutes, I realized he was completely serious. He had truly given everything to my brother and left nothing for me. I snapped. I wasn't only angry that he hadn't saved a single dollar for me, but that he openly called me stupid while calling Eric a genius. That day, I finally told him everything I had been holding in for years. I had hoped for at least minimal help, especially since I fully intended to repay the money once the business became profitable. But he couldn't even offer that. He was selfish, and he simply hated me. I was devastated. Even though I had always known my father didn't love me and clearly favored Eric, I never expected a betrayal like that. We had a massive argument, and that was the last day I ever spoke to him. We said everything there was to say. There was nothing left. I decided I would never see him again, and he agreed. He finally accepted that I was different, not the son he wanted, and that I would never be Eric. Telling my friends that my father wouldn't help us financially was difficult, but they understood. My mother was the only one who truly supported me. She gave me some of her own money and borrowed the rest from my grandparents, something I desperately wanted to avoid, since they were already older and needed savings for medical care and emergencies. But they were happy to help. They invested in us and became our mentors. I'm grateful they took that risk and believed in me. I'm almost certain they're glad they did, because our brand is doing incredibly well and bringing in as much profit as possible. We became very popular among teenagers. It's hard to believe how much work it took and how far we've come, but it's true. Honestly, I think our brand is far more successful than my father's business ever was, and I know that realization couldn't have been easy for him. Then, 2 weeks ago, something unexpected happened. My father called me for the first time in nearly 3 years, and surprisingly, the call was about Eric. He said he had bad news. He started by congratulating me on the success of my business. For a brief moment, I thought he might finally admit he was wrong. Instead, he said they needed my help. He told me that Eric had recently finished his residency, but had gotten himself into serious trouble. While living on his own, he had developed a gambling addiction. My father had only recently found out that Eric was buried in debt, not small amounts, but significant sums of money. People were already looking for him. Eric had returned home just days after completing his residency and was now hiding at my father's place, but it wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, they would find him. According to my father, the people Eric owed were dangerous, and he was genuinely afraid for his son's life. And that was when he remembered me. He said they needed money to pay off the debt and start over. My father lives paycheck to paycheck now, and he believes I should help because my business makes good money. He thinks the amount wouldn't be a serious problem for him the way it is for him. That was all he said. No apologies for the past.
He acted as if we had always had a warm relationship. There wasn't even the slightest hint of regret. That was what angered me the most. He simply expected me to help just because he had finally decided to call. I snapped and told him he could knock on other doors and beg for help, but he was an idiot if he thought he would get anything from me. Then I hung up and blocked his number. After that, I received several calls from an unknown number. I assumed it was my brother and blocked that number as well. 2 weeks have passed, and the guilt still hasn't gone away. Ever since I blocked them, I've been struggling with this heavy feeling that maybe I could fix everything, since I do have the money, but I don't know if they deserve it. I honestly don't know what the right thing to do is. Part of me believes I'm right not to help my brother after my father refused to invest in my business 3 years ago and spent all his savings on him instead. Update 1. After reading everything and taking some time to think, I decided not to let emotions control my decisions. I hadn't talked to my mother at first because I didn't want to burden her. She stopped communicating with my father and Eric around the same time I did, but I know she still worries about my brother. She can't help it, she's his mother. Eventually, I had to talk to her and told her everything. To my surprise, she said I had no reason to help them. They never cared about me or supported me.
Things would be different if my father or brother had at least apologized for how they treated me my entire life, but they never even did that bare minimum. She said Eric dug this hole himself, and now he has to lie in it. If he were younger, she would worry more, but he's an adult who fully understood what he was doing. He made his choices. My father spoiled him his entire life and encouraged his worst traits, and this is the result. Now they both have to deal with the mess they created. Her words made sense. These are my money, earned through hard work, and I don't want to just hand them over to a gambling addict, especially since I don't even know if their story was true or if it was just another attempt to manipulate me into giving them money. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. I've become far more successful than they ever expected, and I know that's hard for them to accept. Update 2. Yesterday, I decided to dig deeper and find out what was really going on. I wanted to make a decision based on facts, not guilt. I'm an anxious person, and I needed to know that nothing truly dangerous was happening. If something terrible had happened to them and I hadn't helped, I wouldn't have forgiven myself. So I went to my father's house. To my surprise, I learned that the house had been sold about 3 weeks earlier, and a new family was already living there. I spoke to the neighbors and found out the house had been on the market for almost a month. The realtor had closed a very profitable deal. The house was in a great location, so my father received a significant amount of money. This happened weeks before he called me. That meant he already had money when he asked me for help. Nothing made sense until this morning when my father's lawyer called me. He informed me that I was being removed from my father's will because, according to my father, I had failed a test he had set up for me. Yes, you read that correctly. There were no real problems, no immediate danger. My father had simply decided to test whether I would support them. Depending on my response, he planned to include me in the will or not. He sold the house because he intended to move closer to Eric, who had recently completed his residency and wanted to settle everything beforehand. I couldn't believe any sane person would think something like this was acceptable. Honestly, I'm glad I failed his ridiculous test. I don't need his money. He could disappear tomorrow and I wouldn't care. I spent weeks worrying and stressing over this, and it led to nowhere. Enough is enough. It's shocking how cold and self-centered both of them are. Some people simply never change and truly believe the world revolves around them. My business is doing great, and if things continue like this, I'll never need to rely on anyone's inheritance. The mystery is solved, and I have nothing left to worry about. The only sad part is this. If something truly serious ever happens to them in the future, I probably won't even believe it. That's on them. Update 3. This update comes almost a year later, and I'm happy to say that I'm engaged. I met my future wife last year. I know for many people, getting engaged after 1 year sounds too fast, but when you know, you know. We've actually known each other since childhood. She moved away for a while, then came back, and when we reconnected last year, we started dating almost immediately. We both felt we had already lost too much time and didn't want to waste any more. This update isn't about my fiancée, though I could talk about her for hours. It's about my father and brother's reaction to the engagement. For some reason, they decided to write me a letter. In it, they said that while they were happy for me and my future wife, they would not attend the wedding. According to them, it would be inappropriate to attend events hosted by someone who doesn't love or respect them. They wished me all the best and made it clear they would not be present at any wedding-related events. My mother, my fiancé, my friends, and everyone else I showed the letter to laughed out loud. It was bold of them to assume they would even be invited in the first place. At least it was comforting to see that they haven't changed at all and still believe the world revolves around them. And that's the end of the story.
I refused to date my friend because of his toxic family. I'm 30, and I have a close friend from college whom I'll call Marlon. He's 31. We studied and graduated together and still meet for lunch breaks since our offices are just a few minutes walk apart. I work in the federal government, and he works at an investment firm. Last October, I let Marlon move in with me after his girlfriend, Paige, 29, broke up with him and kicked him out of her place. Paige is Jewish, openly bi and liberal. She's a tattoo artist who owns her own studio. Her body is beautifully covered in tattoos, and her hair is jet black. Unlike Marlon, she knows how to stand up for herself and enjoys a debate from time to time. A little background. Marlon comes from a traditional evangelical family in Mississippi. His family moved to the San Francisco Bay Area in 2020 during the pandemic to be closer to him, or more accurately, so he could provide for them. Marlon's mother is on welfare, his father receives social assistance, and his brother Ryan, 35, is unemployed and lives off Marlon and their parents. They all live in a 2-bedroom apartment. Marlon, as I said, now lives in my house, but previously lived with Paige. Marlon's family is toxic. They treat him with no respect, constantly criticize him, yet coddle Ryan. They attack Marlon over any excuse, belittle and mock him, even though he's the only one in the family with a college degree and the only one paying for rent, groceries, internet, and everything else. During their relationship, Paige and Marlon had a rule not to interfere in each other's family's matters unless it directly affected them. Paige repeatedly expressed her concerns about Marlon's family and how they treated him, but didn't push further because of this agreement and because his family wasn't directly interfering with her life at the time. She also tried to avoid contact with Marlon's family because she was disgusted by their behavior. Once, when she interacted with his family, she clashed with Marlon's parents because his mother made snide comments about her tattoos and demanded she remove the pride flag, the Ukraine flag, and the BLM banner from her studio. They also disapproved that Paige owned her home, which she inherited from her grandfather, seeing it as shameful for a man if a woman owned a house and business. Marlon even told me his parents didn't like Paige due to her background and suggested they might accept her if she removed all her tattoos and adopted the traditional evangelical lifestyle they raised him and Ryan in, basically wanting her to convert to their faith and become a traditional housewife. Marlon did a poor job defending his girlfriend. He tried to make compromises, like asking her to cover her tattoos or remove the flags for peace. Paige refused and threatened to break up with him if he kept pressuring her. Marlon is genuinely kind, smart, and supportive. He helped me through a difficult time in my first year of college when his family wasn't around. He's independent and complete as a person. But since his family moved closer and re-entered his life, it's as if all his spirit was drained. Paige, I, and other friends tried to talk to him about it, encouraging him to cut ties, but he desperately seeks their approval and recognition, so he doesn't listen. Things escalated when Marlon's family demanded more money for his mother's credit card debts, her shopping, and because they spent much of the money he gave them on traveling to rallies last year's presidential elections. When Marlon couldn't give them more, they turned to Paige, trying to demand that she, as his girlfriend, contribute financially. At first, Paige ignored them, but it reached a breaking point when Marlon's mother and Ryan came to her studio demanding money. They believed that as his girlfriend, everything Paige owned belonged to Marlon, and everything Marlon owned belonged to them. His mother even hit Paige when Ryan tried to break into the cash register. A barber friend across the street saw the commotion and, along with 2 clients, helped restrain Ryan. The police were called, and both Marlon's mother and Ryan were arrested. Paige filed charges, citing an attempted robbery and assault. Regarding my own relationship with Paige, we're just acquaintances. We've crossed paths at events, including those with Marlon, and follow each other on Instagram and Facebook. After Marlon told me about the breakup, I reached out to Paige out of curiosity to hear her side. She explained everything, including how Marlon acted. She told me that after filing a restraining order against his family, Marlon begged her to withdraw it, saying he didn't want to lose his family. He didn't ask if she was okay or apologize, which led Paige to end things immediately. Paige warned me to stay away from his family, highlighting his mother's obsessive behavior regarding grandchildren. When I confronted Marlon, I demanded he apologize to Paige and set boundaries with his family.
He eventually apologized to Paige after a couple of months. I explained that he earns more than I do, but barely manages to support himself while covering 3 adults' expenses. I reminded him that he had already lost friends and his girlfriend due to his attachment to them. He seemed to understand that he still struggles with boundaries, yet he continues paying their debts and bills. I live in my family home with 4 bedrooms, which my parents bought in the 1990s. They moved to Seattle 2 years ago and allowed me to live here as long as I cover expenses. 7 months after Paige broke up with Marlon, Marlon still lives with me. We remain friends, but I require him to pay his share for rent, groceries, and utilities. A few evenings ago, while watching Netflix, Marlon asked if I would go on a real date with him. In college, we had discussed the possibility of dating when his family wasn't around. He's a good person, and we've spent a lot of time together, but nothing happened then. I paused the movie and spoke to him seriously. I said that if it was just about him, I wouldn't mind, because without his family around, he's kind, reliable, and supportive. But I pointed out that almost all his income goes to supporting 3 unemployed adults, and reminded him what happened with Paige. I asked him, if we were together, married, with kids, how could you support our family while providing for your parents and brother? Could you set boundaries with them? When Paige and I asked you to do it before, you failed. Would your parents expect me to support them too? And our cultural backgrounds differ. My mixed race, my mom's white, my dad's native and Catholic, not very religious. Could that also be a problem given your family? Marlon said he would try to find a balance and expected me to occasionally help his parents for peace. He also reassured me that my race wouldn't matter if I agreed to follow their rules when around them. I took a deep breath and said that if he didn't completely cut ties with his parents, I wouldn't date him, and any future relationships would likely fail due to their interference. Since that night, we haven't discussed his parents or dating. For clarity, I never intended to start a romantic relationship with Marlon. We agreed yesterday that while he has feelings for me, we shouldn't date, mainly due to my race. It would create issues with his mother. Marlon still misses Paige and said he might try to get back with her. I reminded him to leave Paige alone and that until he gets serious help and cuts his parents out of his life, any new relationship would be a bad decision. Yes, we have a written monthly rental agreement. He pays me rent every month, small compared to market rates. If I choose not to renew, I must give 30 days notice. A couple of our mutual friends are already encouraging him to find his own place and start living independently. Hopefully, this will give him confidence and help him gradually distance himself from his parents. But who knows?
Update 1. I don't even know where to start, given how complicated everything has become. After Marlon's ex, Paige, broke up with him last October, Paige and I started talking, became friends, and even went to the gym together. Paige recently began dating a guy from our gym whom I'll call Virgil, 33. It turns out Paige and Virgil went to the same school, a few years apart. Over the 7 months since Paige broke up with Marlon, he's been struggling to support his freeloading family. Without Paige, he's basically falling apart. On top of that, he constantly faces humiliation from his family, especially complaints about not earning enough. He also said he misses the support and comfort Paige used to provide after negative interactions with his family, something she consistently did. Despite our and other friends' attempts to convince Marlon to let her go, he kept trying to talk to Paige and win her back. For 7 months, he came to her home or studio to talk, but she always turned him away. He stopped, at least until recently, after Paige threatened to call the police and get a restraining order if he showed up uninvited again. Marlon also complained that he can no longer handle his family's growing demands, debts, shopping, and their constant pressure, especially his mother, who keeps insisting she wants grandchildren.
As some of you guessed from my previous post, I'm also convinced that one reason Marlon wants to get back with Paige, or less so to be with me, is that he needs a woman to help him financially support his family, act as a buffer between him and his relatives, and provide emotional support. At the end of March, Marlon found out Paige had a new boyfriend. She's dating Virgil, and he panicked. He started whining that he didn't want to lose her. I reminded him that she had already broken up with him, so it was over. Despite her new relationship, Marlon tried texting, calling, messaging, and even creating new accounts just to talk to her, believing they could still discuss things. I told him, stop. I even showed him a video Paige recorded specifically for him, where she directly asked him to stop contacting her. Then came Saturday, May 17th. I took time off and went away with a man I met online, whom I'll call Jack, 55. He took me to his mountain cabin for a week. While there, I got a notification that someone was at the door. It was Marlon's parents demanding to speak with him. I assumed Marlon wasn't home, so he didn't answer. Through the video intercom, I told him he was probably at work and asked what they needed. Marlon's parents immediately started complaining about how disappointed they were that their son doesn't earn enough to support them, and how they needed more money for his mother's legal bills, her gambling addiction, and medical expenses. Marlon's father added that he expected Marlon to pay for a Denali pickup he wanted, as his previous truck had been repossessed. Then Marlon's mother asked if I was dating or sleeping with him. I said, no, nothing is going on between us. I added that Marlon had told me she didn't want me dating her son because I'm too dark-skinned for her, so that wasn't an issue. She replied that given her age and declining health, she just wants grandchildren, even if they are mixed race. I reminded her that I'm just Marlon's friend and legally his landlord. That was it. She said that if Marlon and I had sex and I became pregnant, she would choose the baby's name. Then they left. I was in shock and even felt physically sick. On Friday, while leaving with Jack, I had turned on my phone to save battery and not be distracted. I saw numerous missed calls and messages from Marlon and my close friend Tiffany, 30. Jack drove me home, and as soon as I entered, I saw Marlon's room completely trashed. The living room was partially destroyed, and he was sitting on the couch, more broken than before. I asked what happened. He said his parents had come to my house again. He let them in, and they immediately started berating him for not earning enough to pay their debts, bills, and more. In the end, Marlon agreed to take out a loan to fund his family. Then he and his father went to a dealership where Marlon signed the papers for the pickup his father wanted. When he returned home, he was so upset that he trashed his room. I called Tiffany. She's not only my close friend, but also a friend of Paige and Marlon. She came over. We talked to Marlon, tried to calm him, but firmly reminded him again that he needs to cut off contact with his parents. Tiffany reminded him that before his parents' visit, Marlon was happy and confident, with a stable relationship with Paige and handling work well. Now his life is falling apart. I also told him about my conversation with his mother through the intercom and noted that his parents are now starting to indirectly affect my life. Marlon apologized and said he would try to handle it. Tiffany, from a well-off family, offered to pay for therapy for Marlon, but he refused, saying he probably just needs to try something else to gain his parents' approval, still justifying their behavior by claiming we misunderstood them. I was going to tell him that his family lacks boundaries, basic human decency, and self-control, but at that moment it felt pointless. Tiffany and I cleaned up the mess in the living room, and Marlon in his room. Later that evening, I spoke with Tiffany and Paige about what we could do. Paige suggested trying to contact other relatives who might support Marlon. I'm leaning toward evicting Marlon from my house, but I don't want to do it until we find a place where he can stay. I'll post another update if anything changes.
Update 2. All future updates will be from Paige's perspective. Hi, everyone. I came across a post my friend wrote about my relationship with my ex, Marlon, and how she took him in after I kicked him out. I want to clarify that Paige in her story is me. I spoke with the author and told her I had no issue with her sharing this story. After reading her posts and many of your comments, I felt the need to clarify what my life with Marlon was actually like. The author gave Marlon 30 days to move out. His mother, Sylvia, 68, managed to get him fired, and Marlon is struggling to piece his life back together. That's mostly context for what the author already mentioned. Now, I want to tell my story. I'm originally from New Jersey, but moved to California in late October 2021 after my grandfather passed away a year earlier, leaving me a house in Oakland. I didn't know anyone here, but about a week after moving, I met Marlon at a supermarket I frequented. We started talking after I complimented his Lincoln Park shirt. He had messy hair, a slight stutter, seemed a bit awkward and quirky, but in a cute way. After running into each other several times and chatting, I pulled out a marker and wrote my number on his hand, telling him to text or call if you wanted to hang out outside the supermarket. For about 2 weeks, Marlon and I texted and called nearly every day. 2 weeks later, during a phone call, I told him about growing up in a Star Path environment and casually asked if he wanted to visit the Science and Space Center in the city, reopening that week. He enthusiastically agreed. Our first date was Saturday, November 13. I liked that he was smart, passionate, a bit quirky, yet genuinely pleasant. He arrived by taxi, so I drove us to dinner at a Chinese restaurant near the tattoo parlor where I worked. I later bought that parlor from the previous owner when he retired. I explained that around Christmas, while Christian families have traditional dinners, many Jewish families, including mine, go to Chinese restaurants. The date went wonderfully, and we kept seeing each other. Over the 3 years we were together, I shared everything about myself and my family. I told him that on my father's side, I'm Czech Jewish, on my mother's side, Sephardic Jewish, and that my great-grandfather on my father's side was the only family member to survive Auschwitz. That trauma shaped the value I placed on family closeness and support. My mother is from Israel, but immigrated to the U.S. in the 1970s to be closer to family. P.S. No, I'm not an Israeli citizen because my mother didn't register my birth at the consulate. I also told Marlon that years ago I was kidnapped, raped, and tortured, which caused PTSD and substance addiction that I fought for years. Few people know the full story, even in my family. I told Marlon everything, but made him promise to keep it a secret. Marlon, in contrast, was very guarded about his family, which I respected. Over time, he shared that he grew up in a very conservative and strict environment, that his family despises people with higher education, and that he is the primary provider. He tries to earn his parents' love, but I told him parental love can't be earned. It should be mutual and based on care. His immediate family was extremely toxic. His brother Ryan mocked him his whole life, encouraged by his parents. They ridiculed him for going to college, yet now his parents treat him like an ATM, expecting him to financially support Ryan indefinitely. Marlon does have an aunt and uncle, who I'll call Grace, Sylvia's older sister, and her husband, who were genuinely kind and loving toward him. Grace often defended him when Sylvia yelled at him at family gatherings. When Grace intervened, Sylvia usually backed off, though she'd later take it out on Marlon. During our 3 years together, we visited my family on the East Coast 3 times for holidays: Passover 2022 and 2024, and Hanukkah 2023. For Marlon, interacting with my family was a cultural shock. My sister Noah, 26, and I could disagree or even argue with our parents, and it was fine. We could openly discuss anything. Our parents respected personal space and privacy and made Marlon feel welcome. For Hanukkah, my mom even gave him a gift. All this, open discussion, healthy disagreements, respect for privacy, was foreign to him. His father encouraged debates to develop critical thinking. My parents supported my sister and I equally, without favoritism or guilt-tripping. Marlon said our family dynamic seemed like a TV show or movie because his own experience taught him to see such dynamics as abnormal. Many commenters asked why I stayed with Marlon so long. Here's why. For the first 2 years, when his parents weren't meddling in our lives, things were genuinely good. I enjoyed my time with him. He was kind, attentive, passionate, a little quirky, and genuinely sweet. Alone, our relationship was wonderful. I first met Marlon's family on New Year's Eve 2022. He said his parents wanted a normal home celebration and asked if I would host. I agreed. To act as a buffer, I invited my friends, Tiffany, 30, Luna, 29, and my cousin Jacob, 33, with his wife and kids. From the start, Marlon's family was unpleasant. When they learned I owned a home and had my own income, they seemed genuinely offended. Many things in my house offended them. The kids watching shows, my old Bernie 2016 shirt, and my political humor. I jokingly said, well then I am too, because I grew up in a family allowed to talk back, which upset Sylvia. At dinner, Marlon's father and Ryan called him a disappointment and a loser. I asked Ryan, what do you do for work? Which college did you attend? He shut up immediately. I told Ryan and his father that Marlon was the only one in the family to go to college, the only one with a job and paying for everything. They were in no position to belittle him. Sylvia yelled incoherently at me. I laughed in her face, which angered her more. After a few more minutes of argument, Marlon's family left without even waiting for the countdown. Afterward, Marlon complained I had snapped at his parents. Later, as we sat with friends and celebrated the new year, Marlon stepped out to take a call from his mother. She yelled at him for letting me defend him. I reminded him I was his girlfriend, and yes, I would defend him as I expected he would defend me. We argued and slept in separate rooms that night. He later apologized, acknowledging he appreciated my support, as only Aunt Grace had done so before, but said his mom wanted me to apologize to them. I refused. Honestly, I should have seen this New Year's dinner as a huge red flag. Most of Marlon's income went to supporting his parents and older brother, 3 ungrateful, demanding adults living off him. They mocked him, belittled him, and demanded more. I tried not to intervene unless it affected me or our relationship, though I advised him to gradually reduce financial support. I also asked questions like, have your parents ever thanked you? Does dealing with them make you happy? Can you support us and them if we ever marry and have kids? Marlon couldn't answer and waved it off, saying, but they're family. Eventually, he asked me to stop bringing it up, and I did. Things started spiraling around July 2023, when his family became much more intrusive. Sylvia began micromanaging him, demanding raises or job changes. Marlon was startled by every phone call, constantly summoned to their apartment to be yelled at, and sometimes they even came to my house to humiliate him in my living room. After New Year's, I never opened the door for them again. Marlon did. Honestly, I should have immediately banned them from my home. Whenever they came to humiliate Marlon, I defended him, arguing with them, while Marlon defended them while I defended him. Eventually, they turned on me just for supporting him. After they left, Marlon and I argued because he defended them. He said he was trying to keep the peace and earn their respect. Then he said his parents disliked that I was Jewish, had tattoos, and displayed flags in my salon. He tried to convince me to compromise, remove flags, cover tattoos, even consider changing faith for his mother. I was furious. I told Marlon his parents would never set foot in my home again, and if they appeared again, I'd call the police. I also threatened to break up with him because it was clear he wanted me to change for their approval. Marlon started backpedaling, begging me not to leave, and promising to set boundaries with his parents. He never did, and yes, that was another chance for me to leave him that I didn't take. Over the next few months, I increasingly found Marlon crying. He would berate himself, repeating that he needed to try harder. He was in a truly awful state. I comforted him, hugged him during panic attacks, and was his emotional support, and I don't regret it because that's what I do for everyone I love. But now I understand that support has to be mutual. In the following months, I hardly had any contact with his family. But then Marlon's mother, Sylvia, started calling and texting me, demanding that I support them financially as well. She said that as Marlon's future wife, it was my duty to provide for them, let them live in my home, and that since Marlon was the man of the house, I should submit to him, essentially giving him control over my finances. Meanwhile, he was still expected to support his family, but now at my expense. I tried ignoring her or abruptly hanging up during her rants, but that only provoked more outrageous demands. Sylvia asked if Marlon and I were planning to have children and claimed she wanted to choose our child's name herself. Once, she even messaged me to find a girlfriend for Ryan. It all weighed on me so heavily that I tried talking to Marlon, but he didn't take it seriously, brushing it off. A couple of times he even joked about it. I stopped trying to discuss it and told him simply to tell his family to stop contacting me. Of course, that didn't work. In October last year, Sylvia and Ryan came into my salon demanding that I support them. I told Sylvia she was not my responsibility and that if Marlon wanted to give them money, that was his choice, but I was done. She didn't get it. She kept whining about income, credit cards, and so on. While she was whining, I noticed Ryan climbing over the counter trying to open the cash register. That was too much. I grabbed my phone and called the police. While talking to the operator, I suddenly felt a hit to my face, then was pushed into the shelves and fell. I froze for about 5 seconds before realizing Sylvia was scratching my face and arms, trying to grab the phone. Doug, 53, a barber and my friend from the barbershop across the street, ran into my salon with a couple of clients. One client pulled Sylvia off me, and Doug pinned Ryan to the floor. Another passerby and one of my clients helped restrain Sylvia and Ryan. The police arrived. I showed them the security footage. Ryan and Sylvia were arrested, and I was taken to the hospital after the attack. I filed a report. That's why Ryan is now in jail and Sylvia got a fine. Ryan was also charged with assault because he had used a wallet chain and a chair to hit Doug and one of the bystanders helping. When Marlon came home later that evening, he barged in screaming at me for calling the police, complaining that now he had to pay their legal fees, and demanding I retract my statement and tell the police I made it all up, despite video evidence and witnesses of Ryan attacking 2 others. I had a split lip, scratches on my neck, a concussion, and bruises on my face. I want to clarify one detail from the author's first post. Marlon began pressuring me to drop the restraining order only after I had broken up with him. I looked at him for a few seconds and said, "You didn't even ask if I was okay." Marlon immediately blurted out, "Why should I care if you're fine?" trying to backtrack. I told him to just shut up. There was another pause, and I said, "Your mother called me a junkie in the salon. How does she know?" He was silent. I jumped up and screamed, "How does she know this?" That's when Marlon admitted he had told his mother about what happened to me because she wanted to smear me. I told Marlon I was done. I couldn't deal with his family anymore. I didn't feel safe around them. He had broken my trust. It was killing me to watch him humiliate himself to please a family that would never love him. Most importantly, I couldn't be with someone who couldn't support me and whom I couldn't trust. I couldn't be with someone with whom I couldn't see a healthy future. I cried as I said I was breaking up because I couldn't take it anymore. Marlon tried backpedaling again, begging me not to leave, saying things like, "We can talk, we can fix everything if we just discuss it." But when he said, "I want to make both your family and you happy, so if we..." I yelled. I hadn't been happy with him for the past 15 months. Marlon asked, "Can't you just pretend to be happy?" I replied, "That's what you do with your parents. You pretend to be happy." He had nothing to say to that. I took a breath and calmly told him to pack his things. He had 4 days to leave my house, and I didn't want to see him or his belongings when I returned. I went to the bedroom, packed my things and laptop into a backpack, and went to Tiffany asking if I could stay a few days while Marlon moved out. They agreed. That night, Marlon flooded me with calls and messages, begging to talk. I responded only twice, once via SMS, once on Facebook, warning that if he was still at my house by Wednesday, I would call the police and get a restraining order against him. On Monday, the author called me saying she reluctantly agreed to take Marlon in. On Wednesday, I asked Tiffany's husband, Christian, 35, to drive me home because I didn't want to go alone in case Marlon or his family was there. When we arrived, Marlon's car and belongings were gone. Christian helped me change the locks. A few days later, after Marlon moved in with the author, she contacted me to meet. We had drinks, and I told her most of what had happened. I also advised her to set clear boundaries with Marlon
and keep his family away for her safety. Yes, if you're wondering, I'm okay now. For nearly 8 months after the breakup, Marlon continued calling, messaging from different accounts, and even came to my home and salon about 4 times to talk. I usually told him to leave or ignored him. After his rehearsed speeches, which I had stopped listening to, he would leave. The author and Tiffany also promised to keep Marlon, especially his family, away from me, given the restraining order against his relatives. As a side note, I'm now dating Virgil. We went to the same school, though he was several years older. We reconnected in June last year when I learned he had moved to California and was going to the same gym as me. He said he relocated for work, and we started hanging out occasionally, initially just as friends, coffee, walks. I showed him around the city since I was still with Marlon at the time. We officially started dating in March this year. I hadn't told the author, but the last incident with Marlon happened a couple of weeks after I started dating Virgil. Virgil was driving me home when I saw Marlon sitting on my porch. I got out and asked what he was doing. He said the key I had given him years ago no longer worked. Marlon tried to talk to me, rambling nonsense, asking for a second chance, claiming he could forgive me for being with another man if I gave him one. Virgil told Marlon to leave, but he ignored him and kept yelling, including about his mother still following me on Instagram with a new account and disapproving that I'm dating a black man. Virgil is mixed race. His mother is white, father black. I interrupted Marlon and told him I didn't care about his mother's opinion. We no longer see each other, and he needs to leave. I stood between him and Virgil to prevent a fight. I told Virgil to ignore Marlon and that I'd explain everything at home. Once inside, Marlon suddenly shouted that I was still his girlfriend and that I was ruining our chance to be together. He then turned to Virgil and asked, "Do you know she's a junkie and a criminal?" I ran up, threw him against a column. Marlon tried to justify it, claiming he only said it to get my attention and that he just wanted to talk. I composed myself and told Marlon that if he came to my house or salon uninvited again, I would sue him, get a restraining order, and notify his employer officially that he was using sick leave to harass me. I reminded Marlon that if he lost his job, he wouldn't be able to support his parents. Then I calmly told him he still needed to cut contact with his family, reminded him that his mother and brother destroyed his relationship with me, and that he wouldn't have a normal life until he stopped letting them control him. I said I wanted him to be happy, just not with me. After Marlon left, I explained everything to Virgil. We talked, and he said he still wanted to be with me, which I appreciated. He also added that, if needed, I could get a restraining order, though I personally hope to avoid court if possible. I stayed with Marlon for 13 to 15 months, even though I was no longer happy, only because of the hollow hope that things would get better someday and the memory of how good the first 2 years were. Before I met his family, before they interfered, my life was good. Now I understand that Marlon of 2025 is not the Marlon of 2024. If I had a magic wand, I would go back to the late 1990s and ensure Marlon was taken from his parents by child services, so at least he could grow up in a healthy environment, even if it was a foster family. But I also know it's just as unrealistic as thinking his parents will ever truly love or appreciate him. Marlon believes he is noble and selfless because he cares for his ungrateful family. I can't break through that. I don't know how. Finally, why haven't I filed a restraining order against Marlon himself? A few days ago, he still had a job, and I knew that if I sued him or got an order, he could lose his job, and the stress could completely ruin him. Despite everything, I don't want to hurt him if I can avoid it. He never hit or threatened me. I just want him out of my life without destroying him further. Sorry if my account is a little chaotic. I wrote it all out overnight. I'm tired and my head is a mess. I've asked the author to attach my story to her update. Now we'll have a parallel story, somewhat unrelated, but also written by Paige, which I think everyone will find interesting.
Update 3. About 6 years ago, I was 24. I lived in New Jersey, had just finished college, and worked as a shift manager at a fast food restaurant while also doing an internship to become a tattoo artist. One day, a cashier named Jane asked me for help at the register. A man with his son was at the counter, and behind them stood a woman with two small children. The man explained that he was the father of the 10-year-old boy, and the woman was his ex. He was not the father of her other two children. That day was his custody day, and he had taken his son for lunch before going to a museum. The woman, coincidentally at the restaurant, demanded that he buy lunch for her children as well and take all three to the museum. The man said he was responsible only for his son. She argued that he should pay for all her children because their fathers were absent. I stepped in to handle the situation. The man ordered 2 combos for himself and his son and paid in cash. The woman tried to add her children's order to his, but I told her that was not possible and asked her to place her own order. She attempted to grab his wallet, but he pushed her away, and she left, leaving the children behind. The man wanted to buy fries and chili for her 2 children and personally take them to their mother. I added those items to his order, covering the cost from the restaurant. Update 4. Almost 11 months had passed since I broke up with Marlon. We reconnected via Skype to discuss a $3,200 debt. The first 7 to 10 minutes were about how he would start paying once he found work. Then Marlon began reminiscing about our relationship and justifying that he had tried to support his family and save our relationship. I redirected the conversation back to the debt, and when he continued to justify himself, I told him I had no interest in rekindling our relationship and that it was over. We agreed he would start paying $108 per month starting in January when he got a job. Marlon reported that he had started working administratively on his ranch and in business and would follow through with the agreement. As for me, Virgil and I are no longer together, but we remain close friends. We have different plans for the future. Casual meetups. I'm going to Oakland for a month and looking for casual meetups while I am there. I've already arranged a few meetings during my stay in New Zealand, where I will visit my sister and her family.
Hi everyone. I turned 18 just a few days ago, and for my birthday, my dad surprised me with something incredible. My very first international trip to India, just the 2 of us. This trip was supposed to be something really special for so many reasons. My mom passed away when I was only 6. To cope with the loss, my dad and I used to watch Indian movies together all the time. They were colorful, uplifting, and helped brighten even the darkest days. That's how I fell in love with Indian culture. My mom loved those films too. She even had a collection of traditional Indian outfits, even though she never actually got to visit India herself. Before she died, she and my dad promised we'd go there as a family one day. Sadly, she passed away from a sudden brain aneurysm in her sleep before we could make that dream come true. She was only 32. After her death, it was just me and Dad. Watching movies together became our little ritual to keep her memory alive and stay close. Over the years, it made our bond stronger than ever. I know Mom would be proud of us today. That's why India has always held such a deep emotional meaning for both of us. It's not just a trip, it's a promise finally coming true. When Dad revealed at my birthday party that he'd booked the trip, I was ecstatic. I couldn't stop smiling. But not everyone was happy for me. My stepmom, Susan, and her daughter, Nadia, 17, looked like someone had slapped them. And sure enough, after the guests left, I overheard them arguing with my dad. From what I caught, Susan thought he should have postponed the trip so we could all go as a family. Honestly, I was relieved that it would just be the 2 of us. I don't get along with Susan or Nadia at all, and past family vacations with them were a nightmare. I couldn't imagine them ruining this one too, especially since it meant so much to me emotionally. Luckily, they had their own reasons not to join anyway. Nadia had her final exams and upcoming graduation, and Susan was tied up with an important project at work. Still, I can't help but feel Dad timed things perfectly so it could be just us, even if he'll never admit it.
Susan and Nadia came into my life about 5 years ago. At first, everything seemed fine. They acted friendly enough while Dad was just dating Susan. But once he married her 2 years ago, things shifted. Their attitude toward me became cold and strange for no reason I could figure out. I hadn't done anything differently, yet suddenly I was treated like an outsider in my own home. And now, well, let's just say their jealousy hit a whole new level. Things were already bad with my stepmom and stepsister, but what they did before my trip crossed every line. I was never close with Susan or Nadia, but at least in the beginning our relationship was civil and polite. That all changed after Dad married Susan. Suddenly, she started treating me like dirt, and Nadia copied every move her mother made. They'd talk down to me, make nasty little remarks, and act cruel, but only when Dad wasn't around. The moment he walked into the room, they'd flip the switch and turn into sweet, smiling angels. It was so fake it made my skin crawl. Eventually, I needed to tell Dad what was going on. We sat down for a family talk, and at first, Susan and Nadia denied everything. Luckily, I had recorded one of our earlier conversations where they were openly horrible to me. With evidence on the table, they couldn't lie anymore. So instead of denying, they switched to emotional manipulation. They both burst into tears and told Dad they only acted that way because they felt like I hadn't accepted them as family, which was total nonsense. I did see them as family. It was them who treated me like garbage. Yet somehow they expected me to keep being nice to them while they showed me zero respect. Dad was confused and torn. Susan was the first woman he'd really cared for since Mom, and I knew he didn't want to lose that relationship so easily. He asked all of us to try harder to get along. For his sake, I agreed to keep things civil. After that, their behavior shifted again. Instead of being nice in front of Dad and cruel behind his back, they just chose to completely ignore me whenever he wasn't around. It was like I didn't exist. Honestly, I preferred it that way. At least they weren't actively tormenting me. For Dad's sake, we kept up the performance of being one happy family, and that carried on for about a year. Fast forward to just a few days ago. The morning after my birthday, Dad and I had breakfast together, and I pulled him aside. I asked him straight out if Susan and Nadia were upset about not joining us on the India trip. He admitted they were, but also reminded me how much this trip meant to us, especially with it falling so close to Mom's death anniversary. He wanted this to be our special time together, just father and daughter. He promised he'd smooth things over with them later. That was fine by me. Honestly, vacations with Susan and Nadia were torture. Dad and I are explorers. We love walking around, sightseeing, soaking up every bit of culture. They, on the other hand, prefer to sit in the hotel and complain if we're even a little late for dinner. To me, that's not a vacation. That's being trapped. India was supposed to be different. India was supposed to be ours. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that, especially since Susan and Nadia had taken their own little trips together in the past. The only real difference was that ours was longer and farther away, 10 days overseas instead of just a weekend somewhere nearby. But still, it felt completely fair. Dad told me not to stress, to focus on packing and getting ready. He promised he'd deal with Susan and Nadia after we got back. So I did exactly that. For the past 2 days, I was walking on air, too excited to care about their drama. Yesterday, I finished packing everything, double-checked my documents, and tucked my passport into my bag so it would be ready. Our flight was scheduled for today. But now, I don't even know if we're going anymore, because Susan and Nadia crossed a line so insane I still can't believe it. They burned my passport. Yes, burned it. Not lost, not misplaced, they literally destroyed it. I found out just a few hours ago. It was around 6 p.m. yesterday when I was organizing paperwork and noticed it was missing from my bag. By 2 a.m., the truth came out. They had actually set it on fire.
They burned my passport before my trip. My dad's revenge was brutal. When I went through my bag to double-check everything before our flight,
I realized my passport wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe I misplaced it, so I tore the entire house apart, drawers, shelves, even the laundry baskets. 45 minutes later, I was sweating, panicking, and close to tears. It was just gone. That's when Susan and Nadia waltzed into my room with these fake sweet voices and asked, "Lose something?" I immediately felt something was off, but in desperation, I admitted I couldn't find my passport anywhere. That's when Susan tossed something on my bed. It was my passport, or at least what was left of it. Half burned, charred along the edges, completely ruined. She smirked and asked, "Was this what you were looking for?" I froze. My brain couldn't even process it at first. When the shock finally wore off, I decided I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me break down. I calmly set the ruined passport aside, stood up, shut the door in their faces, locked it, and then I collapsed into tears. Dad wasn't home. He was out picking up clothes for the trip. I texted him everything that happened, even attached a photo of the burned passport. Within 20 minutes, I heard him storming into the house. His voice shook the walls as he screamed at Susan and Nadia, calling them psychos and ordering them out. He said he'd already made one mistake when he ignored the first time they mistreated me, and he wasn't about to repeat it just because he once loved Susan. Of course, they immediately tried to fake cry and blame me. Their story? That I'd supposedly left a lit cigarette on my dresser, and that's how my passport caught fire. Which is insane. I don't even smoke. At that point, I came downstairs because I couldn't let them spin lies like that. Dad looked at me and said I was just in time because he had something planned. I assumed he was about to call the police, but no. He went into his office and came back with a stack of papers. Nadia's face went pale the second she saw them. Then, without saying a word, Dad ripped the documents in half right in front of Susan. Turns out those papers were for Nadia's student loan. She needed Dad to co-sign so she could pay for college since Susan hadn't saved a dime for her. Dad had been ready to help. Not anymore. That was his revenge. My passport for her college dream. Fair trade, honestly. Within an hour, Susan and Nadia were gone. They begged, pleaded, even got on their knees, but Dad didn't budge. Now, since the moment they left, they've been spamming me with texts, Nadia especially. She keeps begging me to convince Dad to reconsider, promising she'll do anything to make up for it. She claims they never knew Dad was going to co-sign her loan, and that they just lashed out because they felt excluded. I finally replied once. I reminded them that they've gone on plenty of mother-daughter trips without us, so why is it unfair when Dad and I wanted one international trip with Dad, without my stepmother and stepsister? Their getaways usually last only 2 to 3 days, somewhere nearby, while ours was supposed to be 10 full days in India. That's a big difference. So here I am asking, am I really the bad guy for wanting one international trip with my dad without my stepmother and stepsister? Well, before I continue, I'll just say what I think the answer is. No, not at all. This situation seems clear. I wasn't wrong. I wanted time with my dad, especially on my 18th birthday, and especially since it was in honor of my late mom. What Susan and Nadia did was cruel and manipulative, and it says more about them than about me. My dad, he's the one I feel bad for. He fell for a woman who clearly didn't respect me, and by extension, didn't really love him the way she should have.
Update 2. A lot of people asked why we didn't call the cops after they destroyed my passport. The truth? It didn't even cross my mind at first. I was in shock, panicking, crying, and honestly, what would it have done? They would have just claimed it was an accident, dragged it out forever, and nothing would change. We didn't want that mess. Others also asked why I wasn't in college yet. I graduated high school last year and decided to take a gap year to figure myself out. I worked a few jobs, interned in journalism, and gained some experience in the field I want to study. Now I'm applying to schools, and luckily my grandparents have already promised to cover my tuition, so my dad doesn't have to stress about me. Nadia's situation was completely different, which is why Dad was planning to co-sign her student loan. But after what happened, well, you already know how that ended. As for our trip, today was supposed to be our flight to India. Instead, we stayed home and watched old movies we used to love. It wasn't the same, but honestly, it helped. I finally blocked both Susan and Nadia, and I don't regret it. They don't deserve my sympathy. You were all right. I was only second-guessing myself because I'd been missing my mom and was in a very emotional state. But they betrayed me for no reason, and whatever happens to them now, they absolutely brought on themselves. Update 3. It's been 4 days since my last post, and today Dad came home from work with big news. He filed for divorce. Afterward, we finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding for far too long. He admitted that he'd been selfish. He loved Susan and tried to convince himself it would work out, even when her behavior, and Nadia's, clearly proved otherwise. Instead of trying to repair things with me, they simply shut me out completely. That's not family. That's not love. Dad told me he finally realized he'd been clinging to something toxic and that it was damaging both of us. He deserves better. I deserve better. Maybe he did love her, but it was obvious she didn't love him enough to even tolerate me, and that's not the kind of woman he should spend his life with. Update 3. The reason Susan never truly accepted me was simple. She could never see me as part of her family. Deep down, she probably knew that for Dad, I would always come first, and that neither she nor Nadia could ever replace me. That jealousy and insecurity made her bitter, and eventually it poisoned everything. Dad may never fully understand why their behavior shifted so dramatically, because before the wedding they treated me kindly, but the moment the vows were said, it's like they became different people overnight. Dad admitted he ignored the signs, hoping things would somehow settle, but the damage was already done. He told me he's finished pretending. We're not a happy family, and there's no point acting like one. That same day, after meeting with his lawyer, he filed for divorce. Later, he apologized for everything I'd had to endure because of his choices, and we just hugged. Some might call him a flawed father, but to me, he's the best dad I could ever ask for. Sure, he made mistakes and sometimes thought only of himself, but every mistake was outweighed by 10 good things he did for me. I love him, and I always will. Update 4. A few days later, it became official. Susan was served divorce papers. Dad came home early from work and locked himself in his office. I could hear him shouting into the phone, and it had me worried. Hours later, he finally explained. Susan had called, threatening to ruin him if he went through with the divorce. She promised to spread lies, throw accusations, and destroy his reputation. The first time she caught him off guard at work, but once he was home, he recorded the call. When she realized he had proof, she flipped out, accused him of blackmail, and turned the whole thing into chaos. Dad didn't back down. He told her if she tried to drag his name through the mud, he'd make sure she would regret it. From her voice, he could tell she was shaken. He said the process will start soon, and once it's finalized, he and I will finally take that trip to India together. He promised me. For now, we just hope she doesn't create more problems. But honestly, with the evidence I have, including the destroyed passport, she knows she's fighting a losing battle. Update 5. Hi again, quick update because I'm super busy. The divorce is officially finalized, and the outcome? Honestly, Dad hit the jackpot. Susan walked away with nothing. No alimony, no settlement, no ridiculous child support she tried to claim out of nowhere. She fought dirty, but it didn't work. So now it's just us. We kept everything, and for the first time in a long time, life feels calm. I already have my new passport, and Dad and I have started planning our India trip again. This time, it's really happening. I can't even describe how excited I am. More importantly, I'm genuinely happy now. Thank you all for your support along the way.
My son stole his late mother's ring to propose to his girlfriend, and now he's refusing to speak to me because I made him give it back. I'm 46. My son Jake is 23. He was a good kid growing up, which is why what he did hit me like a punch to the gut. I also have a daughter, Amber, who's 16. When my wife died during the pandemic, she already had a will in place. She had been immunocompromised for nearly a decade, so she'd prepared everything early. In her will, she split her estate between the kids. Jake got his share immediately because he was already an adult. He used that money as a down payment on his condo. He also received his mother's car. But every single piece of her jewelry was left to Amber. Among those pieces was a vintage gold ring with a diamond in the center and pale blue sapphires on each side. It had been in my wife's family for generations. Her grandfather, a jeweler, made it by hand for her grandmother. When her grandmother passed, it went to her mother and eventually to my wife. After her death, it was meant to go to Amber, exactly as the will stated. Losing my wife broke me, but I held it together for the kids. They were my anchor. That's why my son's betrayal feels like a rusty knife between my ribs. Jake has been dating a girl named Sarah for about 8 months. She's the type who loves jewelry, big, flashy, and a lot of it. One day Jake told her about the heirloom pieces his mother left behind, the ones meant for Amber. And Sarah apparently became obsessed with seeing them. So Jake went into my bedroom when no one was home and showed them to her. He later admitted that to me. I was angry, but I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. A week ago, Jake came to me practically begging to give him that ring, the heirloom, so he could propose. He said Sarah fell in love with it the moment she saw it, and that he was convinced it was the perfect engagement ring. He seemed certain I would be thrilled that he was planning to propose, but I told him this wasn't up to me. The ring belonged to Amber, and I wasn't going to allow him to pressure her into giving it up. I told him he could ask her once, politely, and if she said no, the conversation was over forever. Jake agreed. He asked Amber in front of me. She immediately refused. She wanted to keep the ring in the family. She adored it and always had. To her, it was priceless. The idea of giving it away devastated her. I told Jake that was that, and he needed to drop it. He left upset, but I assumed he'd accept the answer and start looking for a similar ring. But then a few days later, he showed up again while I was at work to talk to Amber again. It escalated into a huge fight. Amber called me sobbing. I phoned Jake and told him to leave my house immediately and stay away from his sister. He yelled that he had as much right to the ring as she does because my wife was also his mother. I reminded him he already received a substantial inheritance. Money, the car, and the jewelry was specifically left to Amber. End of story. He hung up. Amber later texted that he stormed out furious. But then, before I could even get home from work that day, Amber called again, yelling that Jake had come back, gone into my room, taken something, and left without saying a word. When she tried to stop him, he shoved her aside. I rushed home and checked the jewelry box. The ring was gone. I called Jake repeatedly, no answer. I finally texted him and said I would contact the police if he didn't bring the ring back immediately. And even if he'd already proposed, it didn't matter. The ring wasn't his to give. That finally got his attention. He called me crying, saying I couldn't do that because he was my son. I said, "Watch me." He stole the ring, he assaulted his sister, he crossed a line I could not and would not ignore. He called back shortly after and confessed he had already taken Sarah to a restaurant and proposed. The ring had been in his possession for less than an hour, and she was already wearing it. I told him that wasn't my problem. He stole it, and he needed to return it. Whether that ruined his proposal wasn't my concern.
I said I would get the ring back one way or another, even if it required a police report and a lawyer. He sobbed, begging me not to destroy his life. I told him he destroyed his own life when he stole from his sister and from his dead mother. The ring needed to be back in our hands by morning, or I would start legal proceedings. The next morning, he actually showed up with his girlfriend. They tried to guilt trip me. Turns out she knew the ring was stolen and still wanted to keep it because she fell in love with it instantly. I told her she could get a jeweler to make a replica if she wanted it that badly, but the original wasn't hers and never would be. Jake begged again, but Amber and I stood firm. Return the ring, or we're going to the police. Sarah ripped the ring off her finger and threw it at Amber, calling me a vicious bastard before running out of the house in tears. Jake yelled that I probably ruined his relationship. I told him he ruined it himself the moment he decided stealing from his family was acceptable. What kind of son steals from his sister and his dead mother? It's sick. He had nothing left to say and stormed out after her. I haven't involved anyone in this mess, but Jake has. He tried to rally friends and relatives to his side, and instead got the opposite. Everyone tore into him for what he did. I've received messages and calls from people supporting me and Amber. A week has passed and Jake still refuses to speak to me. I sent him detailed photos of the ring in case he wants to have a replica made.
But making an identical copy turned out to be extremely expensive unless they used imitation stones. Jake still hasn't replied to my last message. I have no idea what's happening between him and his girlfriend now, or whether they're still together after everything that happened. But even now, I'm certain he had no right to keep that ring. After this whole disaster, I moved all of my late wife's jewelry to a secure safety deposit box that only I can access. It will stay there until Amber turns 21, maybe even longer, depending on what she wants. I won't risk anything like this happening again. I know I made the right decision by getting the ring back, but that doesn't mean it's easy. I don't want my son to resent me forever, and I don't want our family to turn on him. If anyone has advice on how to fix this situation without returning the ring or spending a fortune on a replica, I'm open to hearing it. Update 1. Well, Sarah officially broke up with Jake. He's devastated and blames me for everything. Some people have already pointed out that I might have overrated my son by calling him a good kid. Maybe he used to be. The person he's become lately is a stranger to me. Whether he always had these traits or whether he just fell under the influence of the wrong woman, I honestly don't know. But it doesn't excuse what he did. After I forced them to return the ring, Sarah supposedly spent several days crying in bed. Then she told Jake she didn't want any other ring. She wanted my wife's ring and couldn't imagine an engagement without it now that she'd worn it, even for just a few hours. Jake tried to get sympathy from everyone, friends, relatives, even Sarah's family, and it completely backfired. Word spread fast, and local drama lovers clung to the story like sharks smelling blood. I didn't even ask for updates, but people kept messaging me anyway, so I knew everything that was going on, even though neither Jake nor Sarah would talk to me. Jake still had the photos of the ring I sent him in case he wanted a duplicate made. He took them to a jeweler. The jeweler said he could try to create a replica from images, but he'd need to examine the original to take proper measurements, estimate the materials, and see the stones up close. Jake hesitated for a while. Then, swallowing his pride, he called again. Sarah was now willing to consider a replica, but only if it was perfect down to the smallest detail. A few days after my first post, they asked me to bring the ring to the jeweler so he could give an exact price estimate. I agreed and took a long lunch break to meet them. I retrieved the ring from the safety deposit box and kept it in my sight the entire time. When Sarah saw it again, her eyes lit up with pure greed. She reached her hand out, asking to just hold it for a minute. I told her no, I wasn't going to risk her running off with it. The jeweler examined it carefully. He said the ring was far more valuable than we had assumed.
It was handcrafted by my wife's grandfather in the 1940s, with a large diamond in the center and light blue sapphires on the sides. The band was thick 18-karat gold, and the stones were set in platinum. There were delicate floral engravings all around the ring. Just the gemstones for a replica would cost more than Jake had in savings. The labor alone, entirely by hand, would be extremely expensive. The final price was 5 times more than Jake had ever saved in his life. At best, he could put down a deposit and spend years paying the debt off. Jake was willing to consider cheaper alternatives, including using imitation stones or modern materials. The jeweler even showed us 3 modern rings with similar designs at a reasonable price. But suddenly, Sarah slapped Jake across the face, called him a pathetic broke loser, then turned to me and called me a spiteful bastard again for stealing her ring. She insisted the original belonged to her because Jake used it to propose. She even held out her hand, expecting someone to slide it onto her finger again, and demanded I give it back, claiming Amber didn't really need it. She said, "Your wife's family ring is not going to serve her anyway. She's not even going to propose to anyone. Someone can just buy her another ring someday." That was the moment I lost my temper. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her the truth. My wife's family ring will never be hers. Jake had no right to give it to her, which is why he stole it behind my back. Neither of them ever had any claim to it. I told her that people like her, who think they're entitled to anything they want, are exactly what's wrong with the world. She raised her hand as if to hit me too, but the look on my face must have stopped her. She spun around, screamed something intelligible loud enough to make my ears ring, and stormed out, knocking over a display case on purpose on her way out. Jake stared at me with pure rage, but didn't say a word until I asked why he was even dating someone like her. All he said was that he loved her, then went after her. A few days later, Sarah ended things for good, telling Jake he didn't appreciate her since he couldn't get her the ring she deserved. She also said she couldn't imagine having a father-in-law like me.
She felt utterly humiliated because of me and cried, convinced that everyone now saw her as a gold digger. Honestly, I don't think people were that far off. She slapped my son just because he suggested a cheaper replica of a ring he couldn't afford, and then threw a full-blown tantrum when I wouldn't hand over the original ring the moment she demanded it. That is gold digger behavior. Maybe it's just my opinion, but I doubt Sarah would have stayed with my son if someone wealthier appeared on the horizon. It really seemed like all she wanted was that ring, nothing more. Right after the breakup, Jake tried to get into my house again while I was gone. I have no idea why, but thinking back, maybe he was after the emergency cash in the safe, or thought our family jewelry was still there. I hadn't told him yet that I moved everything to a bank vault. I hated even considering that my own son might break into my home, but he had stolen from us once before, so it wasn't impossible. Someone here advised me to change the locks. I did. Jake's key doesn't work anymore. I'm even thinking of installing security cameras now. Amber called me terrified when Jake showed up. He was pounding on the door, demanding she let him in. I tried calling him, no response. That must have scared him off, because according to Amber, he walked away right after his phone rang. He has a special ringtone set for my number, so he definitely knew it was me. He called me back later that evening. I didn't let him start yelling. I immediately demanded to know why he was trying to break into the house when I wasn't home. He had frightened his sister. She almost called the police. Jake dodged the question and instead began yelling about how I didn't trust him because I changed the locks. I told him, of course I don't trust you after what you did. He shouted that I should just be happy for him and that if his mother were still alive, she'd want him to propose with that ring. That set me off. I told him if she truly wanted that, she would have left the ring to him in her will. Then he started whining that everything was my fault. He repeated all the garbage Sarah had told him, how she called me stingy, how I supposedly didn't think she was good enough for him. I told him he was putting words in my mouth. I barely even knew Sarah and never interfered with their relationship, at least not until he stole the ring. When he tried to argue, I asked him, name one time I ever said something bad about Sarah before the ring incident. He went silent. He couldn't recall anything, because I had hardly seen her at all during their entire relationship. I didn't even know they were dating until they'd been together for 3 months. But that wasn't the point anymore. I asked again why he tried getting into the house. He refused to answer, so I listed the possibilities myself. If he came for the ring or any other heirlooms, too late. Everything is secured elsewhere. If he wanted access to the emergency cash, he'd never get into the safe. And if he came to hurt his sister, I'd deal with him myself. Judging by his silence, I hit at least one nerve. Eventually, he said he was quitting his job, selling his apartment, and moving far away so he'd never have to speak to me again. His final words were, "Enjoy your perfect little daughter." I don't understand how my son changed so drastically in just 1 year. I never called Sarah a manipulative gold digger, only said she had wrapped him around her finger and loved shiny things. Not much difference, I know, but now it's painfully obvious she is manipulative, especially after the dramatic performance she put on trying to keep a ring that never belonged to her. She cried for days over a ring she knew was stolen. Then she exploded when she couldn't keep it or even get a replica. Because of her, my son cut me and his sister out of his life. It hurts. And I'm furious that he chose this path just to please a woman he'd only been dating for 8 months. That's not long enough to talk about marriage. I dated my wife for over 2 years before proposing. And honestly, I can't imagine how disastrous it would have been if Sarah had actually married my son. I know Jake will blame me for a long time. I don't know if we'll ever speak again. I hope we do someday, but right now, we both need distance. Amber is struggling too. She's grateful I got her ring back, but just as shocked as I am at what Jake has become. She calls him a jerk for shoving her aside while stealing the ring. Thankfully, she has plenty of support from me and the rest of the family. Jake has no support left. Relatives have been calling or messaging him to express their outrage. Even his former best friend stopped by to apologize to me. He and Jake had a huge fight over this whole mess, and when that friend refused to take his side, Jake cut him off too. Sarah, Jake's ex, also ran into trouble at home. Her parents contacted me to hear my version and later apologized for her behavior. They only knew part of the story and were horrified to learn the rest. They had always thought she was kind, but said she had changed a lot in recent years and they were disappointed in her. They previously helped her pay half the rent, but said they won't renew her lease once it expires. She can either pay it on her own or find a new place. Now she blames and curses me too. I don't know what's wrong with people these days. When I was Jake's age, people like this were rare. Now they're everywhere, spreading toxicity like a flood. All I can hope is that one day my son wakes up and finds his way back to being the good man he used to be. Whether he ever speaks to me or not, I'll still wish him happiness. Update 2. And please, stop asking me for photos of the ring. A lot of people have messaged me wanting to see it or order a similar one. I told my daughter about these posts, and she's proud of me, but she does not want the ring online. It's hers. I don't need a reason. Her choice is final, and I will respect it.
I'm not thrilled about the idea of posting photos either. If strangers start copying the ring, it'll lose what makes it special. I was fine with my son making a replica that would have stayed within the family, but there's no way I'm putting it online for everyone to duplicate. I deleted the pictures I had sent Jake a long time ago. The ring is stored in a bank vault now. It won't stay there forever. When I can afford it, I plan to buy a proper home safe. Over the weeks since my first post, I installed security cameras around the house, and thank God I did. For everyone asking whether my son got back together with Sarah, no, they're not together. Jake really is selling his apartment and hasn't spoken to me since that last phone call, the one where he wished me a nice life with my precious daughter because he didn't get what he wanted from me. I met with my lawyer and updated my will. I didn't cut him out entirely, but he lost a large portion of what he would have inherited. After everything that's happened, I can't bring myself to feel sorry for him anymore. My daughter Amber called him a simp, and once I looked up what that meant, I realized how accurate it is. But I don't want to stay angry or sad. Neither emotion does me any good. I'm trying to let go and move forward. Jake clearly chose a life without us. Maybe one day he'll realize how wrong he was, but I can't force him to rethink his choices. I ran into Sarah by accident recently. She spotted me at the mall while I was out with a friend. She started yelling across the crowd, calling me a stingy old miser. I didn't have to defend myself. My friend laughed and called her out as a thief and a greedy woman who only wanted my late wife's ring because she couldn't afford anything like it herself. People around us immediately turned to stare. Sarah flipped us off and stormed away, knocking things over, even a small child who started crying. When she realized she had hurt the kid, she sprinted off like she was escaping a crime scene. Later that day, she showed up at my doorstep, screaming that it was my fault her friends now call her a gold digger and won't speak to her. I told her plainly she is a gold digger. She had no right to that ring in the first place, and the way she cried for days over something she knew had been stolen, then dumped my son because he couldn't buy her what she wanted, is classic gold digger behavior. I told her I'd make sure she never sees that ring again. She kept screaming nonsense all the way back to her car. I hoped she'd finally leave us alone, but she didn't. For those who thought drugs were behind her and Jake's behavior, sorry to disappoint, but no. The police reports confirmed she was clean. Whatever's going on with her, it's all her own doing, and apparently Jake's too. Last week, Sarah was arrested for trying to break into my house. The cameras recorded her sneaking into my backyard and trying to hack down my back door with an axe. The alarm went off and she ran, but the front cameras captured her face and her car perfectly. She even dropped the axe with her fingerprints on it. By the time police arrived, she was gone, but they found her later at home. They were only going to arrest her for trespassing and attempted break-in, but she started fighting, so they had to take her down and drag her out. She clearly needs mental help. I spoke with her parents afterward. They offered to pay for the damaged door and told me what they knew. No drugs in her system. Serious mental health issues, yes. They told me they planned to move her out of town once the legal mess is handled. I don't know what happened after that, but honestly, it's not my place to pry. I do feel a little sorry for her. She seems genuinely unwell. I assumed Jake already knew since everyone else was talking about it, but he's completely cut off contact. Not just with me, but with his friends and extended family too. One of his coworkers finally reached out and said Jake is still furious about everything. He insists the ring would have been a small price to pay for his happiness. Now that Sarah is gone, he's switched to blaming her instead, calling her a crazy gold digger who ruined his life. It seems he only knows how to point the finger at others. Until he learns to take responsibility for his own actions, I don't see how we can repair our relationship. He's not going to get anywhere in life if he keeps deflecting blame. I hope some time alone helps him cool down and reflect on the mess he created. Update 3. Most people online have been supportive, but every now and then some random stranger messages me calling me a bad father or a Python psycho. Honestly, these people need a hobby. If their goal is to break me down, it's not working. Though it is annoying, not a single one of them offered a better solution or advice on how I should have handled any of this. They just want to yell at someone. One of them even lost their account, not because of me, but because they were just trolling everywhere. Most recently, someone messaged me from an account created the day before. Maybe it was the same guy. Do these people really have nothing better to do? If anyone has criticism, fine, but at least offer real suggestions instead of calling me a terrible father or a monster. People who only want to argue and insult do nothing to improve the situation. End of update. They do all of this just to feed their own egos. And honestly, you can tell something's wrong with these people if their only source of entertainment is harassing a widower who's simply trying to hold his family together. Real mature, right? And for those trolls insisting I should have acted differently, let's go over the facts. First, my son showed my late wife's heirloom ring to his gold-digging girlfriend without my permission. Second, I gave him a fair chance to ask his sister for the ring properly, since he wanted it to propose. She refused, and that should have been the end of it. Third, he stole the ring, attacked his own sister, and within an hour slipped it onto his girlfriend's finger like nothing happened. Fourth, I was dragged through the mud for demanding the return of a stolen heirloom that belonged to my late wife and was legally willed to my daughter. Fifth, I even tried to help them get a replica made, but his girlfriend threw a tantrum because she didn't get the original, and my son couldn't afford a proper copy. Sixth, after she dumped him, my son tried to break into my house, likely to steal something else. Seventh, his ex tried to publicly humiliate me and then knocked over a child during one of her outbursts. Eighth, the same ex-girlfriend tried to break down my back door with an axe and was arrested. Ninth, and now my son blames literally everyone except himself, while the only people supporting him are trolls online. If after all of that, I'm still being painted as the villain, then the people writing these messages seriously need their heads checked. Yes, I changed the locks. That's a normal reaction when someone breaks into your home, even if that someone is your own son. No, I wasn't trying to escalate anything. Jake and Sarah escalated it on their own. I wanted to talk things out calmly, but all they did was demand what they felt entitled to. And I wasn't going to pay for their replica either. When my wife passed away, my son inherited over $50,000 and his mother's car. My daughter inherited the family jewelry. That seems perfectly fair to me. My son used all the money as a down payment on a nice apartment. And for the record, I paid for his college, and I'll pay the same for my daughter when her time comes. I don't have a favorite child, but sometimes people behave horribly, and you just can't fix that for them. Someone told me my son probably packed up and left because his pride won't let him admit he's wrong. He wants a fresh start somewhere no one knows him. I can understand that on some level, but it doesn't change the fact that he dug this hole himself. Now I have a son who hates me for the consequences of his own actions. Relatives and friends message me constantly about him, even though I never asked. Meanwhile, my daughter is terrified he'll come back and hurt her. I'm already arranging therapy for her as soon as possible. I installed a full home security system with cameras. That decision already paid off. His ex-girlfriend tried to break down my back door. I tried to help my son become a better person without enabling him, but he rejected every attempt and shoved my hand away, figuratively and literally. So tell me, trolls, how does any of this make me a monster? Final update. My son just left town. I hoped the drama would finally end, but it didn't. Yes, Jake sold his apartment, no idea for how much, but he probably made a decent profit. Last Saturday, he loaded everything he could into his car and drove off. Rumors never died down, so the whole town knows what he did. At one point, Jake almost got into a fight at a bar after someone confronted him publicly. I tried to visit him one last time, to talk, maybe reconcile before he moved away. By then I'd realized leaving town was probably the best thing he could do. His reputation here was completely destroyed. But when I knocked, he refused to open the door. I told him I just wanted to talk, but he yelled through the door that I ruined his life and there was nothing to discuss. Then he went quiet, only to suddenly bring up the ring again, saying I should have just let Sarah keep it or helped pay for the replica. Then he said it didn't matter anymore because Sarah turned out to be unstable and they broke up for good, and he didn't want anything to do with me or his sister ever again. That made me snap. I told him his behavior was unacceptable. He
He attacked his own sister and stole from his own family. He was lucky I never called the police. Everyone who knew what he did took my daughter's side. When the entire town thinks you're wrong, that's a pretty massive red flag. I told him to stop this performance fueled by his pride. Whether it was grief for his mother, or the fact that he's now the same age I was when he was born, or something else, I didn't know. But he knew he was wrong and refused to admit it, and I was done covering for him. He never spread rumors about the ring. He and Sarah did that. I'm tired of being blamed for the mess he created himself. Only narcissists and cowards behave like that. His mother and I raised him better, and he knows she would never have approved of this, but she's not here to tell him. If you steal something that isn't yours, you don't get to blame the owner for wanting it back. He went silent for a few seconds, then yelled, "Screw you, Dad." I heard him crying and breaking things inside. A neighbor at the end of the hallway peeked out and quickly hid again, so that little scene will definitely spread as gossip too. He refused to say anything else, so I left. But as I was exiting the building, a police car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out and asked for my name. When I told them, they said someone reported that I was trying to break into an apartment. I explained that I'd been arguing with my son through the door and never tried to force my way in. I only knocked. I told them the entire story, mentioned the neighbor who saw and heard everything, and reminded them the building had security cameras. One officer went upstairs to talk to the neighbor. The other put me in handcuffs.
He was very polite and explained that the handcuffs were just a precaution, since they still didn't know who was telling the truth. I told him I understood he was just doing his job, and he let me sit on a nearby bench. After about 10 or 15 minutes, hard to tell since I couldn't check my watch, the officer who went inside radioed back that the neighbor's story mostly matched mine. Several other neighbors also confirmed hearing our conversation through the door. Then he said he would check the security footage, which took even longer. Since I still couldn't see the time, all I could do was sit and wait. The kind officer turned on the radio on his phone so I wouldn't be completely bored. Eventually, the second officer radioed again and told his partner to take off the handcuffs because the cameras backed me up. The audio wasn't great, but it was clear enough to show that I never tried to break into the apartment. Once I was uncuffed, the 2 officers talked quietly for a moment. Then they asked if I really was the father whose son had stolen the ring that belonged to his late mother. I admitted it and asked how they knew. They said the story had already been going around the station, and once they heard my version, everything clicked. One officer said he had been on duty the day Sarah was arrested and described how she acted like a wild animal, trying to bite people and screaming threats like, "Do you know who my parents are? I'll have you all ruined." His wording was much harsher than that. I could only stare at the ground in embarrassment. The officers told me to go home and suggested I avoid coming back. I nodded and left. As I walked away, I noticed them going back into the building, probably to talk to Jake. I'm certain he was the one who called the police because later some of his neighbors messaged me online saying the officers had chewed him out for a false report so badly that he nearly cried. They also reminded him about the ring incident and said his behavior was pathetic. Judging by the timeline, Jake must have exaggerated heavily because the police showed up almost immediately after we started talking through the door. He's lucky he didn't get arrested for wasting their time. When I got home, my daughter Amber comforted me. She said I did everything I could and that it wasn't my fault Jake turned into a jerk. Still, it hurt. Maybe I've lost my son forever. I took the next day off work, shut myself in my office, played Dragon Warrior on my NES emulator, and ate vanilla ice cream just to calm down. Jake left town over the weekend. Maybe I'll never see him again. But if I do, I hope he realizes I've always cared about him. Yes, he treated me horribly, but I'm still his father. If he knocked on my door tomorrow wanting to talk, I'd let him in. I just hope it won't take 10 or 12 years for that day to come. Some people asked how big our town is if rumors spread so fast. It's not tiny, more like slightly below average in size. The reason gossip traveled so quickly was my wife's enormous and tight-knit family. They're everywhere in this town, no exaggeration. I could bump into one of them just going for a walk or buying groceries, and many of them loved to gossip. When Jake started looking for support from relatives online, that lit the fuse. First, they told him exactly what they thought of his behavior, and then they repeated the story to everyone they knew. The situation spun out of control before I even realized what was happening. Jake got his 15 minutes of shame, and it should have ended there. But his ex, Sarah, made everything worse by telling the story to absolutely everyone trying to get sympathy. That doubled the drama, and soon both of them had lost all their friends. People I had never met started messaging me, even though I never shared my contact information anywhere. No idea how they found me, but at this point it doesn't matter. Now that Jake has left town, things are finally calming down. Within the first week or two, I managed to convince most relatives to delete their posts about Jake, but the damage was already done. I begged people to stop spreading the story. I didn't want attention. I just wanted life to go back to normal. But everything Jake and Sarah did only made the mess bigger. Some also asked about the guy who recognized Jake in the bar and confronted him. From what I heard, he was a neighbor of one of Jake's ex-friends, so it's no surprise he knew what Jake looked like. And yes, even at my age, I still love old video games. It's my little way to relax. My kids never cared for them, and my wife didn't like them either, so it's always been my personal hobby. I don't play often. Maybe once or twice a year, I speed run Dragon Warrior using cheats, because I've never been a great gamer and probably never will be.